At my late wife's funeral, while my son and daughter-in-law whispered behind me about putting me in a nursing home, a strange woman brushed past and slipped something small into my hand. She leaned close to my ear, her voice ice cold. "You'll need this tonight." Then she vanished. I didn't react. I only clenched it in my fist, pretending to tremble exactly the way they expected. A little later, sitting in the back seat of the car on the way home, I secretly opened it. My heart stopped. The truth inside left me completely stunned and suddenly afraid to breathe. I'm so glad you're here. Before we dive in, drop a comment for me. What are you doing right now while you listen? Working, driving, maybe just taking a quiet moment. I read everyone. Quick note, some details here are fictionalized for storytelling. What matters most is the message this story carries. At 65, I sat in the front pew of St. Paul's Cathedral, wearing a wrinkled gray cardigan, my hands trembling, as I held the memorial program for my wife of 41 years. The program bore a photograph of Constance from our 30th anniversary, her silver hair pulled back in the pearl comb I gave her, her smile carrying the warmth of 4 decades together. White hydrangeas covered the altar in cascading waves, their petals so bright they hurt to look at in the morning light, filtering through stained glass. She had loved hydrangeas, planted them throughout our Beacon Hill garden every spring. Now they surrounded her memory like a final embrace she would never feel. I let my hands shake, let my head bow forward as if the weight of grief had finally broken my spine. Let my eyes glaze over while the organist played Bach's Air on the G string, the same piece we danced to at our wedding in 1984. Behind me, my son Thane, 38, leaned toward his wife and whispered just loud enough for me to hear. "The old man's health is getting worse. We need to discuss the facility next week." Saskia, 35. My daughter-in-law and estate planning attorney nodded without looking at me. Her voice carried that particular blend of concern and impatience I had been cataloging for 6 months. "Before he deteriorates further, the Wellesley place has an opening." I did not turn around, did not let my breathing change, did not give them any indication I heard every syllable, every inflection, every pause between their words. My 15-year-old granddaughter Wren sat beside me, her small hand gripping mine, with a pressure that felt like desperation. Dark circles shadowed her pale face, and when I glanced at her, she looked away quickly, too quickly. She had not met my eyes properly since October. Dr. Cedric Ashford, 61. My family physician for the past 12 years, approached from the side aisle and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Lester, how are you holding up?" He spoke slowly, loudly as if volume could pierce dementia. "Have you been taking your medications regularly? You really should stop by my office next week for a checkup." I nodded with the vague compliance of a man who no longer fully understood what pills were for. "Yes, doctor. Tuesday is good." He patted my shoulder twice and moved on to offer condolences to Thane. My son and daughter-in-law exchanged a look over the top of my head. They thought I did not see. They did not know I had been counting every one of their blinks for the past 6 months, cataloging every whisper, measuring every false kindness like a surgeon calculating the exact depth of an incision. The service continued with readings from Ecclesiastes and a eulogy delivered by our neighbor who had known Constance for 15 years, but could not explain why a woman in perfect health had died since her sleep on a camping trip in the Berkshires. Heart failure, the coroner said. Sudden cardiac arrest. No warning signs. Just a 63-year-old woman who went to bed under the stars and never woke up. I had performed 8,000 cardiac surgeries in my career. I knew what sudden death looked like. I knew what it smelled like. I knew the difference between a heart that stopped because it was tired and a heart that stopped because someone made it stop. Outside the cathedral windows, I could see the small garden where Constance had planted hydrangeas 6 months before she died. The bushes were showing their first blue blooms of the season, tight clusters of periwinkle petals pushing through dark green leaves. She had told me they would bloom in March. She had been right. As if she herself were calling for me to wake up. When the service ended, the crowd filtered into the rain-slicked courtyard. March drizzle misted down from a gray sky, and mourners opened black umbrellas like a field of crows spreading their wings. I shuffled forward with my cane, an accessory I did not need but had been carrying since November, and let Wren guide me toward the stone archway. That was when the woman brushed against my side. She was perhaps 50, with gray hair pulled into a tight bun and a black coat buttoned to her throat. I did not recognize her face immediately. but her movements were deliberate, the way she angled her body to block the sightline from Thane and Saskia. The way her left hand found mine in the crowd and pressed something small and firm into my palm. "You'll need this tonight," she whispered, her breath warm against my ear. Then she was gone, disappearing into the sea of umbrellas before I could turn my head. I closed my fingers around the object, kept my expression blank. Let Wren lead me to the car, while rain soaked through my cardigan and plastered my hair to my skull. It was only when I was alone in the back seat, Thane driving Saskia in the passenger seat, discussing lunch arrangements, that I opened my hand and looked at what the woman had given me. A business card. Old. The paper had yellowed at the edges and the ink had faded to a dull gray, but the text was still legible. MIT, Toxicology Laboratory. Catherine Reeves, Ph.D., Research Fellow. I stared at the card for 10 seconds without breathing. This card did not belong to the 21st century. The MIT logo in the corner was the old version discontinued in 1997. The phone number began with a now obsolete area code, and the name Catherine Reeves was one I had not uttered in 28 years. Catherine and I had researched digoxin toxicity together when I was 37, back when I still split my time between the operating room and the research lab. We had published 2 papers on cardiac glycoside poisoning. We had mapped the pharmacokinetics of digitalis overdose down to the minute. I had not spoken to her since the day I left MIT to focus full-time on surgery. Why now? Why this card? Why tonight? I slipped the card into my breast pocket and resumed my vacant stare out the rain-streaked window. In the front seat, Saskia was saying something about estate planning and asset transfers. Thane was agreeing in that tone he used when he wanted her to think he was listening, and I counted their words, measured their pauses, waited. Because whoever had just handed me Catherine Reeves's card from 1997 knew something about toxicology, knew something about my past, knew something about why my wife, who went to sleep healthy and woke up dead, deserved more than the word natural stamped on her death certificate. And they were telling me I would need that knowledge tonight. The 1830 Beacon Hill townhouse stood exactly as I had left it 3 hours earlier, its white columns framing the door where my private nurse waited with a glass of water and 2 small pills. Gail Stafford, 50, had been hired by Saskia 3 months ago to monitor my health and ensure medication compliance. She wore pale blue scrubs and a practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Time for your medicine, sir," she said, extending the pills in her palm. "Dr. Ashford wants you taking these regularly." I shuffled forward with my cane, letting my hand shake as I reached for the pills. "Yes, yes, thank you, Gail." She watched me place them on my tongue, watched me take the water glass, watched me swallow. What she did not see was how I held the pills under my tongue, pressing them against the roof of my mouth while the water went down my throat. How I turned toward the hallway with a mumbled excuse about needing the bathroom. How I walked slowly to the powder room and locked the door behind me. I leaned over the sink and spat the pills into the white porcelain basin. 2 small blue tablets, lorazepam, if I remembered the shape correctly. Anti-anxiety medication prescribed to keep me calm, to keep me compliant, to keep me from thinking too clearly about what happened in October. I ran the water until the pills dissolved into nothing. If I was going to understand what the woman at the memorial wanted, I needed a mind that was not dulled by sedatives. I shuffled to my study and closed the door. The room smelled of old leather and the ghost of pipe tobacco from years when I still smoked. I sat at my desk and pulled the business card from my breast pocket. Under the yellow glow of the desk lamp, the faded ink looked even older. MIT, Toxicology Laboratory. Catherine Reeves, Ph.D. A phone number from an area code Massachusetts had not used since the 90s. The card sat on my desk like a grenade with the pin already pulled. I just did not know when it would detonate. I searched for the MIT Toxicology Lab's current number. The website listed a directory, but Catherine Reeves's name did not appear. The general number matched the one on the card, updated to the current area code. I stared at the screen for 5 minutes, listening to the house settle around me. Gail was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Thane and Saskia had returned to Cambridge. Wren was upstairs in her room, silent as she had been for 5 months. At 8:47 p.m., I picked up the phone and dialed. It rang once. "I've been waiting for this call for 6 months, the voice said. It was her, the woman from the memorial. I recognized the precise diction. "Who are you?" I asked. "Simone Whitfield. I worked under Catherine at MIT before she retired. Your wife came to see me in September, 2 weeks before she died. She asked me to keep something safe. She said if anything happened to her, I should wait 6 months, then contact you. My hand tightened around the phone. What did she ask you to keep? A blood sample, drawn by her own hand on September 27th. Preserved, labeled, stored in our secure freezer since October 3rd. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the desk. That's impossible. I signed her death certificate. The coroner ruled it a myocardial infarction. Your wife didn't die of a heart attack, Dr. Riddle. Silence. I ran preliminary tests on the sample last week, Simone continued. I found levels of digoxin that would stop a horse's heart. Not therapeutic levels, not accidental overdose. Lethal concentration. Someone poisoned your wife with cardiac glycosides over weeks, maybe months, and she knew it was happening. I could not speak, could not breathe. Why didn't she tell me? The words came out as a whisper. I don't know. She said you couldn't know. Not yet. She said she needed to protect you first. She made me promise to wait 6 months before reaching out. Where are you? MIT, Building 56, 4th floor. Same lab where you and Catherine published your digoxin papers in '97. I need to see the sample. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., come alone. Park 3 blocks away on Massachusetts Avenue and walk. Don't tell anyone where you're going. If your family thinks you're still the broken old man from this morning, keep it that way. Why the secrecy? Because whoever poisoned your wife is still watching you, and if they know you're investigating, you'll be next. She hung up. I set the phone down and stared at the empty desk. My hands were shaking, not the performative tremor I used for Gail and Dr. Ashford, but real tremors from adrenaline. Outside the window, the hydrangeas my wife had planted were beginning to show their first blue blooms of the season-tight clusters of periwinkle petals pushing through dark green leaves. She had loved those flowers, had spent every April on her knees in the garden, pruning and fertilizing and talking to them as if they could hear her voice, as if she herself were calling for me to wake up. I had signed the death certificate. I had watched them close the casket. I had stood beside the grave as they lowered her into the ground. But Simone Whitfield had been waiting 6 months with a blood sample my wife asked her to preserve. A sample that proved Constance did not die of natural causes. A sample that proved someone had been feeding her poison slowly, carefully, in doses calibrated to mimic cardiac failure. Someone who knew how digoxin worked. Someone who understood pharmacology. Someone who had access to her food, her medication, her daily routine. Someone in this house. I looked at the 2 blue pills dissolving in the bathroom sink and wondered what else I had been swallowing for the past 6 months. I drove my vintage Volvo XC90 across the Charles River at 8:47 a.m., the spring sun glinting off the water as I parked 3 blocks away from MIT Building 56, exactly as Simone had instructed. The pills I had not swallowed the night before were still dissolving somewhere in Boston's sewer system. The question of what else I had been taking would have to wait. First, I needed to see the proof. Simone Whitfield waited at the side entrance wearing a white lab coat over dark slacks. She did not smile, just nodded once and gestured for me to follow her through the glass doors and up 4 flights of concrete stairs. We did not speak until we reached the secure toxicology lab on the 4th floor. The room smelled of acetone and formaldehyde. Through the window, the Charles River stretched below us, its surface rippling with morning wind. Simone unlocked a steel cabinet and withdrew a small nitrogen vial, its surface frosted with condensation. She set it on the stainless steel counter between us. I received this from your wife herself 2 weeks before she died, Simone said. She called me and said, Simone, if I die under unusual circumstances, any circumstances, keep this blood sample for at least a year. Test it for everything. But wait 6 months before contacting Lester. He'll need time to grieve first. I stared at the vial. Through the frost, I could see the dark red liquid inside, frozen at negative 196 degrees Celsius. She knew, Simone continued. She was afraid, and she didn't tell anyone else. I reached for the vial with gloved hands, the cold bit through the latex numbing my fingertips. I held it as if I were holding my wife's hand one last time, the hand that had drawn this blood from her own vein on September 27th, 2 weeks before she died in the Berkshires. Why didn't she tell me? My voice came out flat clinical. I don't know. She made me promise not to contact you for 6 months. She said you needed to appear broken. She said if they thought you were investigating, they'd kill you too. She didn't say who, but she was terrified, Dr. Riddle. That day she brought me the sample, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the syringe. I set the vial down, She was so afraid she didn't dare tell me. Did she think I would die with her? Or that I would think she was losing her mind? Show me the results, they said. Simone glanced at the clock. Mass spectrometry takes 6 hours for a full cardiac panel. I started the run last night. It should be ready by 3 p.m. I'll wait, I said. Simone nodded and gestured to a small office adjacent to the lab. There's coffee in the break room. Don't leave the building, and don't tell anyone you're here. I spent those 6 hours in a chair by the window, watching students cross the quad below. At 3 p.m. exactly, Simone appeared in the doorway holding a single sheet of paper. She did not say anything, just handed me the printout and stepped back. The text was black and white, clinical precise. Sample ID CR-92724-01 test, cardiac, glycoside panel, serum, digoxin, concentration 8.3 nanograms per milliliter, reference range, therapeutic 0.8 to 2.0 nanograms per milliliter, toxic level greater than 4.0 nanograms per milliliter, lethal range greater than 5.0 nanograms per milliliter. I read the numbers 3 times. 8.3 nanograms per milliliter, over 4 times the lethal concentration, over 10 times the maximum therapeutic dose. Your wife had no history of cardiac arrhythmia, Simone said quietly. No digoxin prescription in her medical records. No reason to take this medication. This concentration indicates a dose administered within 2 to 4 hours of her death. Orally, most likely, masked in something bitter, herbal tea, coffee tonic water. I set the paper down on the counter. My hands were steady. My breathing was controlled, but inside my chest something was breaking that had nothing to do with cardiac function. My wife had been killed by digoxin, the same cardiac glycoside I had spent 3 decades studying, the same drug I had published 17 papers about, the same medication I could dose with my eyes closed, calculating the exact amount needed to stop a heart without leaving obvious pathological markers. Someone had used my own expertise against me, had studied my research, had learned from my publications how to kill a 63-year-old woman in a way that would be ruled natural causes. Who in my family has enough medical knowledge to measure a lethal dose of digoxin that leaves no trace of foul play? The answer leaped out with surgical precision: my daughter-in-law Saskia, estate planning attorney with a background in healthcare law. She had access to medical databases. She had the intelligence to understand pharmacology. She had been pressuring me about facility placement since November. But estate attorneys did not typically know how to calculate lethal cardiac drug concentrations, which meant someone had coached her, someone with medical training, someone who understood digoxin kinetics, someone who had access to my wife during her final weeks. I looked up at Simone. I need a copy of this report. She handed me a sealed envelope. Already prepared. Don't keep it in your house. They're watching you. I know, I said. I stood and walked to the window. Below, the Charles River reflected the late afternoon sun, its surface gold and copper. Constance had loved this view. We had walked along that river 30 years ago, when I was still young enough to believe I could save everyone. Now, I knew the truth. My wife had died alone, knowing she was being poisoned, too afraid to tell me, because she thought they would kill me too. She had been right. But she had also been wrong, because I was not the broken old man they thought I was. I was a cardiac surgeon who had spent 8,000 operations learning how to find the source of bleeding and cut it out. And I was going to find out who coached my daughter-in-law in murder. I returned to the Beacon Hill mansion at 7:15 p.m. and told Gail I was exhausted, retreating to my bedroom early with the lights dimmed, preparing to watch what she would do when she thought I was asleep. The question of who had coached Saskia could wait until morning. Tonight I needed to know what else the nurse was giving me. I changed into my pajamas, slowly fumbling with the buttons. I sat on the edge of the bed and let my shoulders slump forward. When Gail knocked on the door at 7:30 p.m., exactly, I was already under the covers with my eyes half closed. "Time for your evening medication, sir," she said. "Let me get you some water." I watched her through my eyelashes as she moved to the nightstand. The bedside lamp cast dim yellow light across the room. She opened the prescription bottle labeled Lisinopril, my blood pressure medication. She shook out one pill into her palm. Then she set it aside on the nightstand. From a small case hidden in her scrubs pocket, she extracted 2 unlabeled white pills, small, round, scored down the middle. She dropped them into the water glass and handed it to me, along with the lisinopril pill she had just rejected. "Here you are, sir. Make sure you drink all the water." I took the glass with a trembling hand and brought it to my lips. Let the pills touch my tongue. Let the water wash over them. Then I turned my head toward the pillow and held the pills under my tongue until she left the room. The moment the door clicked shut, I spat them into my palm. 2 small white tablets. I brought them to my nose. The faint bitter almond scent confirmed what I suspected: benzodiazepines. Low-dose lorazepam or midazolam designed to cause cognitive fog, impaired judgment, and short-term memory suppression. This nurse was not just monitoring me, she was executing a systematic medication substitution protocol. This nurse isn't just a spy. She is executing a pre-written protocol. The question is, who wrote it? The family doctor or the daughter-in-law, coached by someone in the medical field? I wrapped the pills in tissue and placed them in the locked drawer of my nightstand. 14 pills total now. Enough evidence to prove pattern and intent. I lay in the darkness and listened to Gail move through the house below me. Heard her make a phone call from the downstairs study, too quiet to make out words, but the cadence suggested she was reporting compliance to someone. At 8:30 the next morning, my study phone rang. I had been awake since 6 a.m., reviewing everything I knew. The mass spectrometry report sat in a locked drawer. The substituted pills sat in another drawer. "De Lester, it's Otis," the voice said. Otis Langley, 70. My family attorney for 30 years. A man who had drafted my will, managed my estate planning, and helped Constance and me navigate inheritance when our parents died. "Good morning, Otis," I said. "I just received a request to amend your family trust," he said without preamble. "They're proposing to add your daughter-in-law as a co-trustee with independent discretionary power over asset distribution. Did you authorize this?" "No, I didn't think so. Lester, do you know what your daughter-in-law's specialty is?" "Estate planning." "No." He paused. "She studied estate fraud. I checked the firm she works for has had 3 civil suits for undue influence on elderly clients in the last 5 years. She was one of the named attorneys." The room went very still. 3 civil suits, I repeated, all settled out of court with non-disclosure agreements. But the pattern is consistent elderly client with substantial assets, gradual cognitive decline, family attorney hired by adult children, trust amendments granting discretionary power assets transferred within 18 months. She's not just an estate planning attorney, Lester. She's a professional. 3 civil suits, undue influence on elderly clients. She was a named attorney. I set my coffee cup down very carefully. "What's the value of your current trust?" Otis asked. $4.2 million. And if she becomes co-trustee with independent discretionary power, she can transfer assets without my consent. She can place me in a facility against my will if 2 physicians sign off on cognitive decline. Exactly. The language in this amendment is very carefully crafted. This is her playbook. I thought about the nurse upstairs swapping my prescribed medication for benzodiazepines designed to cause the exact cognitive decline that would justify facility placement. I thought about Dr. Ashford asking about my medication compliance at the memorial. I thought about Thane and Saskia whispering about Wellesley facility openings. The nurse was executing a medical protocol. Saskia was deploying her professional estate fraud expertise. But who was coordinating them? "Shall I reject the amendment?" Otis asked. I thought for 3 seconds. If I rejected it outright, they would know I was alert. They would accelerate their timeline. "No," I said. "Promise them 1 week. Tell them you need time to review the legal language. I need time." He understood immediately. He asked nothing else. 1 week, he said. "But Lester, be careful. If she's as good as I think she is, she'll have contingency plans." "I know," I said. I hung up and stared at the phone. The pieces were connecting. The nurse was executing a medical protocol to cause cognitive decline. Saskia was deploying her professional estate fraud playbook to seize legal control. Someone had coached her in dosing lethal digoxin to remove Constance, the only person who could have stopped this. But who was coordinating them? Who had the medical knowledge to write the protocol and the strategic vision to orchestrate a 6-month campaign of systematic elder abuse? I needed to search my wife's study. If she had known enough to preserve blood evidence, she had left more clues. I stood outside Constance's 3rd-floor study. For the first time in 6 months, my hand on the doorknob, knowing that once I crossed this threshold, I would be opening the wound of her absence all over again. The coordinator, whoever had taught Saskia how to dose lethal digoxin and written the protocol for Gail to execute, was still hidden. But if Constance had preserved blood evidence, She had left more clues. She had been too careful not to. I turned the knob and stepped inside. The room smelled of dust and old paper. Afternoon sunlight slanted through the window, overlooking the Charles River, illuminating particles suspended in the air like tiny ghosts. Her desk sat exactly as she had left it in October, fountain pen, uncapped reading glasses folded beside a half-finished book on New England gardens. Coffee mug with a dried ring of espresso at the bottom. I had not moved anything, had not touched anything, had avoided this room because opening the door meant admitting she would never sit at that desk again. I walked to the desk and began searching the drawers. The first drawer held stationery and stamps. The second held a small wooden box with our wedding photos and dried hydrangea petals from our 20th anniversary. The third drawer stuck when I pulled it wedged shut by something heavy. I pulled harder. The drawer came free. Inside was a small brown leather notebook, the kind sold at university bookstores for students to take field notes. The cover was labeled in Constance's neat handwriting, Garden Notes 2024. I opened it to the first page. It was not about gardens. The first entry was dated September 12, 2024. Found small white pill in second floor bathroom sink trap. Not prescribed to either of us. Saved in envelope A, September 18, 2024. Another pill, same type. Found in kitchen garbage disposal. Saved in envelope B, September 22nd, 2024. Third pill. Guest bedroom, nightstand, drawer, hidden behind lamp. Someone is planting these. Saved in envelope C. I turned the page. There was a photograph taped to the paper with clear tape. A candid shot taken from the doorway of the kitchen. Saskia stood at the counter, her back partially to the camera, holding a small glass vial up to the light. The date written below, in Constance's handwriting, October 9th, 2024. 9 days before she died. I stared at that photograph for 30 seconds without breathing. My wife had not just suspected. She had documented. She had photographed. She had been conducting a systematic investigation. I turned to the last page. The handwriting was more hurried here, less neat. Catherine MIT Lab Emergency Protocol. Blood sample delivered September 27th. Instructions wait 6 months if I die. Contact Lester only after grief period. Husband do not tell, yet prove first. Cannot risk alerting them. If they know I know, they will kill us both. Trust only Catherine. Trust only evidence. She knew. She was afraid. She fought alone. Because she believed no one else, not even me, could be trusted. She was right. I feel the shame of 41 years of marriage. I had been a cardiac surgeon for 30 years. I had saved 8,000 lives, but I had not saved the one that mattered most because I had been too blind to see what was happening in my own house. My wife had died protecting me, had fought alone because she thought involving me would get us both killed, had documented everything in a notebook disguised as garden observations. I closed the notebook and held it against my chest, feeling the weight of her fear soaked into every page. At 10 p.m. that night, I stood in my ensuite bathroom with all of my prescription bottles lined up on the counter. Lisinopril 5 milligrams, prescribed by Dr. Ashford for blood pressure control 12 years ago. Bottle filled March 1st, 2025. And beside it, a bottle of unmarked white pills. The ones Dr. Ashford called a cardiac supplement. The ones he told me were essential for heart health. The ones I had been taking every morning for 6 months. I opened the bottle of white pills and poured them into the toilet. Flushed once, twice, watched them disappear into Boston's water system. Then I opened the lisinopril bottle, shook one pill into my palm, brought it to my lips, paused. If they were coordinating a systematic attack of benzodiazepines from the nurse estate fraud from Saskia digoxin in my wife's tea, then every medication I received was suspect. Every pill, every supplement, every vitamin. I had been a cardiac surgeon long enough to know my own baseline. Blood pressure 120/75. Resting heart rate 62 beats per minute. No arrhythmia, no angina. No shortness of breath. I did not need blood pressure medication. I never had. I spat the pill into the sink and ran the water until it dissolved. Then I pulled out my own notebook, a small black moleskin I had been carrying since my surgical training days, and wrote, Day 1. March 20th, 2025. Stopped all medications prescribed by Dr. Ashford. Will fake compliance for next 30 days. If I survive without symptoms, I have proof I never needed them. If I develop symptoms, I know they were keeping me alive. Either way, I will have evidence. I set down my pen and looked at myself in the mirror. 65 years old, gray hair, lines around my eyes from decades of squinting under surgical lights, hands that had held human hearts and felt them beat. They think I am weak. They will learn in time that they have misjudged a heart surgeon with 30 years of experience. Day 1, the countdown begins. I closed the notebook and turned off the bathroom light, walked back to my bedroom, and got into bed. In the morning, I would pretend to take the pills Gail brought me, would hold them under my tongue and spit them out when she left, would maintain the facade of a confused old man losing his mind. But for the next 30 days, I would be watching every move they made while they believed I was medicated into compliance. They thought they were executing a plan to remove me, to seize control of $4.2 million in assets, to eliminate the last obstacle between them and my wife's estate. They did not know I had found Constance's notebook. They did not know I had stopped taking their pills. They did not know I had been counting their blinks for 6 months. They did not know that the broken old man sitting in the front pew at the memorial service was the same man who had spent 8,000 operations learning to find the source of bleeding and stop it. The countdown had begun, and I was no longer grieving. I was hunting. The crystal chandeliers cast sharp light across the 12-seat mahogany dining table where my son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter sat for what Saskia had called a family discussion about my future. It had been 24 hours since I started day 1 of the countdown. 24 hours of pretending to swallow pills I spat into the sink. 24 hours of watching Gail through half-closed eyes as she reported my compliance to someone on the phone. 24 hours of being the broken old man they expected while my mind stayed sharp and clear. Now they were moving to the next phase. Gail had prepared roasted chicken with winter vegetables. The smell filled the dining room, rosemary garlic butter. Wren sat across from me, picking at her food with mechanical movements, her eyes fixed on her plate. Dark circles shadowed the hollows beneath her eyes. She had not looked at me once since sitting down. Saskia waited until Gail had served dessert and retreated to the kitchen before opening her small leather briefcase. "Dad, we need to talk about your living situation," she said, sliding a glossy brochure across the polished table. I picked it up with trembling hands, the tremor carefully calibrated to suggest weakness, not rage. Wellesley Senior Living. Premier Memory Care Suite. The cover showed silver-haired residents playing chess in a sunlit common room, smiling as if they had forgotten they were paying $18,000 a month to be warehoused. "We've booked a tour for this coming Monday," Saskia continued. "The Memory Care Suite has 24-hour medical supervision, medication management, social activities, everything you need." Thane leaned forward, his face arranged in an expression of filial concern that would have fooled anyone who had not spent 38 years watching him practice lying. "Dad, living alone like this, we're not at peace," he said. "If something happens, we wouldn't know. You could fall. You could forget to eat. You could—" "I understand," I said quietly, letting my voice waver just enough to suggest confusion. "Let me think about it." Saskia smiled, a small, tight smile that did not reach her eyes. "Of course," she said. "Take all the time you need." She thought I had already lost, thought the benzodiazepines and the fake cardiac supplements had done their work, thought I was too cognitively impaired to understand what $18,000 a month meant or what independent discretionary power over my trust would allow her to do once I was locked away. She did not know that just then under the table, I saw her hand move. Under the table I see it, Saskia's hand, the orange juice, a small white pill dissolving. Wren's glass sat 6 inches from her plate. Saskia's hand passed over it, a movement so quick and practiced that anyone not watching for it would have missed it entirely. A small white object dropped from her palm into the amber liquid, disappeared without a splash. Saskia pulled her hand back and resumed cutting her chicken as if nothing had happened. Wren picked up the glass and drank. I watched my 15-year-old granddaughter swallow whatever her mother had just given her, and I felt something break inside my chest that had nothing to do with cardiac function. They were not just poisoning me, they were poisoning her too. The next morning at 10:30 a.m., I stood in the reading room of the Boston Public Library at Copley Square, pretending to browse the gardening section while I waited for Wren. I had sent her a text from my old flip phone, the one Thane and Saskia did not know I still carried. The message was simple. "Need help finding hydrangea books at library. Can you meet Grandpa at 10:30? She arrived 15 minutes late wearing her school uniform and carrying a backpack that looked too heavy for her thin frame. When she saw me, she tried to smile, but the expression died halfway across her face. "Hi, Grandpa," she said. Her voice was flat, exhausted. I led her to a table in the corner, away from the other patrons. Up close, the dark circles under her eyes looked even worse than they had at dinner. Her hands trembled as she set down her backpack. "Have you been sleeping well?" I asked gently. "You look pale lately." She shook her head. "I'm fine, just tired from school." "Ren." I reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were ice cold. "You can tell me the truth." Something in her face crumpled. Her eyes filled with tears. "Mom says I have to take vitamins to study better," she whispered. "Special vitamins she gets from Dr. Ashford. She says they'll help me focus. But lately I keep having nightmares." "What kind of nightmares?" "I see Grandma." Her voice broke. "I see Grandma in the woods at the campsite, the one in the Berkshires where we went in October. She's standing by the tent and she's saying something to me, but I can't hear it. I try to get closer, but I can't move. And then I wake up, and I can't remember if it was a dream or if it really happened." My heart stopped. "Ren," I said carefully, "were you at the campsite the night Grandma died?" She stared at me with wide, frightened eyes. I don't know. Mom says I wasn't. She says I stayed home that weekend. But I keep seeing it. I keep seeing Grandma's face. And she looks scared, Grandpa. She looks so scared." I held her trembling hand across the library table and felt the world tilt beneath me. My 15-year-old granddaughter is shaking just like I was 6 months ago. But she doesn't understand why, and that makes it so much worse. She had been there. She had witnessed her grandmother's murder, and Saskia was giving her sedatives those vitamins from Dr. Ashford to suppress the memory, to keep her from remembering what she saw that night in the Berkshires, to keep her from becoming a witness. "Grandpa, am I going crazy?" Ren asked, her voice small and broken. "No," I said firmly. "You're not going crazy. You're remembering something important, and I'm going to help you." This was no longer just about avenging my wife. This was about saving my granddaughter before they destroyed her mind completely, before they erased the one witness who could tell me what really happened on October 18th, before they did to her what they had almost done to me. At 5:03 p.m., with Gail napping in the first-floor guest room and Ren at her violin lesson across town, I slipped up the stairs to my granddaughter's bedroom on the 3rd floor. I needed to know exactly what Saskia was giving her. Needed evidence that would prove my 15-year-old granddaughter was being systematically drugged to suppress the memory of witnessing her grandmother's murder. Ren's room smelled of vanilla and old books. Her bed was neatly made, the pale blue comforter tucked with military precision that made my chest ache. Constance had taught her to make hospital corners when she was 7 years old. On the nightstand sat a small amber pill bottle with no label. I picked it up and shook it. 20 or 30 pills rattled inside, small, white, round, identical to the benzodiazepines Gail had been trying to give me. I unscrewed the cap and shook one pill into my palm, placed it carefully in a small evidence bag from my pocket, the same kind I had used in my research days when collecting tissue samples. Then I moved to the mini fridge in the corner of her room. Inside was a half-empty bottle of orange juice with a straw still in the cap. I poured 2 ounces into a sterile sample bottle, sealed it, and placed both containers in the medical dry ice transport box I had brought from my study. The entire operation took 90 seconds. I was closing the bedroom door when I saw it, the shadow at the end of the hallway. Gail, she saw me. She stood at the top of the stairs, her silhouette backlit by the afternoon sun streaming through the hall window. She did not move, did not speak, just watched me with her head tilted slightly to the side, as if she were calculating how much this piece of information was worth. I shuffled past her with my cane clutching the transport box against my chest. "Just looking for my reading glasses," I mumbled. "Thought I left them in Ren's room last week." She smiled. "Did you find them, sir?" "No, must be somewhere else." I continued down the stairs, feeling her eyes on my back the entire way. She had seen me enter Ren's room, seen me leave carrying something. How much time did I have before she reported to Saskia? I drove my Volvo to MIT in silence, the transport box sitting in the passenger seat beside me like a loaded weapon. Simone was waiting at the side entrance to Building 56. I handed her the package without a word, along with a handwritten note, "Analyze immediately. My 15-year-old granddaughter." She looked at the note, then at me. "How long?" she asked. 12 hours, 24 at most. "I'll have preliminary results by morning." I drove home and pretended to take my evening pills from Gail, pretended to watch television in my study until midnight, pretended to sleep while I lay in the darkness, counting the hours until I would know what they were doing to my granddaughter. At 11 a.m. the next morning, Simone called. 2 results, she said without preamble. Her voice was tight, angry. 1, your granddaughter's vitamin is 0.5 milligrams of midazolam. It's a benzodiazepine used for short-term memory suppression and sedation. At this dose, administered daily, it would cause recurring nightmares, difficulty forming new memories, and fragmentation of traumatic memories. It's exactly what you would give someone to prevent them from remembering something specific. I gripped the phone hard enough to make my knuckles white. And the second result, silence for 3 seconds. The white pill your family doctor prescribed you, the one he calls a cardiac supplement, is a placebo. No active ingredient, just lactose and binding agents. And the lisinopril bottle Gail has been giving you, I had you bring me one of those pills last week when you came for the blood analysis. It's also a placebo. You haven't been taking actual blood pressure medication for at least 90 days. The room tilted. And that's impossible. Dr. Ashford prescribed. Dr. Ashford has been giving you sugar pills while telling you they're life-saving medication. Do you understand what that means? I understood. They didn't need to poison me heavily. They just needed to withhold my medication and wait for the heart attack to come naturally. It was the perfect scheme. Old man died of natural causes. Fate reunited him with his wife. Bitterly ingenious. Now, Lester, listen to me, Simone said urgently. You've been without blood pressure control for 3 months. Any significant stress could trigger a cardiac event. You need to see a real physician immediately. You need actual medication. If they're planning something that would raise your stress levels, facility, placement, confrontation, anything, your heart might not survive it. That's exactly what they're counting on, I said quietly. Then you need allies. You need people outside that house who can help you. People they can't threaten or corrupt. I know. I'm sending you the lab reports by encrypted email. PDF files with full spectroscopy analysis. Keep them somewhere they can't find. If something happens to you, at least there will be evidence. Thank you, Simone. Don't thank me. Just stay alive long enough to use it. She hung up. I sat at my desk for 20 seconds without moving. Outside the window, the hydrangeas my wife had planted were showing more blue blooms every day, their petals bright against the dark soil. Constance had died because someone gave her a lethal dose of digoxin that stopped her heart in her sleep. I was supposed to die because someone withheld my medication and waited for stress to stop my heart naturally. Wren was being given memory-suppressing drugs to erase the witness testimony that could prove her grandmother's murder. It was systematic. It was coordinated. It was brilliant in its cruelty. And I was running out of time. Gail had seen me in Wren's room yesterday. She would have reported it to Saskia by now. They would know I was investigating. They would accelerate their timeline, which meant I needed allies, people who owed me debts they could never repay, people who would help me without asking questions. I pulled out my old address book, the leather-bound one I had kept since my surgical training days, and flipped to the section marked T. Garrett Thornton, private detective, former Boston PD homicide. The man whose life I had saved in 2011 when he came into Mass General with a knife wound to the subclavian artery and 60 seconds left to live. I picked up the phone and dialed his number. It was time to stop running. Time to stop pretending to be the broken old man they thought I was. Time to start building the case that would destroy them. The Half Door Cafe in South End smelled like dark coffee and old subways, the kind of place where former cops met contacts they didn't want seen, and where Garrett Thornton was waiting for me at a corner booth at exactly 4 p.m. I had called him that afternoon 3 hours after Simone told me my medication had been replaced with placebos. I needed allies, people who owed me debts they could never repay. Garrett Thornton, 55 private investigator and former BPD homicide detective, stood when I approached. He was built like a man who had spent 30 years chasing criminals' broad shoulders, scarred knuckles, eyes that missed nothing. He extended his hand. I shook it. You saved my life in 2011, he said without preamble. Quadruple bypass after 3 other hospitals refused the case. You took me anyway, operated for 11 hours. I woke up with a second chance I didn't deserve. He sat back down and looked at me with an expression I recognized, the look of a patient who understood they owed you everything. I owe you a life, he said. Now tell me what I need to do. I pulled out a handwritten list and passed it across the table. Shadow my family doctor for 7 days, I said quietly. Dr. Cedric Ashford, 61 years old, lives in Newton. I need to know where he goes, who he meets, especially after 9 p.m. and shadow a man named Corbin Hewitt, hospice pharmacist at Mass General. He's my son's best friend. I need to know if he's supplying illicit cardiac medications. Garrett read the list without expression. Then he looked up. What am I looking for? Evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. He nodded once. Just once? It's enough. He understands no need to ask why. Double my normal rate, he said. Cash only, no paper trail. And if this goes where I think it's going, I know a federal judge who owes me a favor. Thank you, Garrett. Don't thank me. Just stay alive long enough for me to help you. I left the cafe feeling something I had not felt in 6 months. I was no longer alone. The next morning at 9:30 a.m., Saskia arrived at the Beacon Hill mansion with a stranger in a gray suit. I was sitting in the living room pretending to read the newspaper upside down when they walked in. Dad, this is Dr. Martin, Saskia said brightly. He's a geriatric psychiatrist from McLean Hospital. We thought it would be helpful to have an objective evaluation of your mental health. Dr. Martin, a man in his 50s with thinning hair and wire-rimmed glasses, extended his hand. I shook it with appropriate confusion, letting my grip be weak. Nice to meet you, sir, he said. This will just take a few minutes. Simple questions. He sat across from me and pulled out a clipboard. Can you tell me what day it is today? I hesitated, frowned. Tuesday. And the date? March 22nd. It was March 24th. And who is the current president of the United States? I paused for 5 seconds. Obama. Saskia shifted in her seat. I could feel her satisfaction. Can you subtract 7 from 100? 93, I said slowly. And 7 from that? I counted on my fingers. 80, 86, it was 86. But I had taken 15 seconds to get there. Dr. Martin made notes, asked me to draw a clock showing 3:15. I drew the circle too small, put the numbers in the wrong places, made the hands point to 4:20. When the evaluation ended, Saskia walked Dr. Martin to the door. I sat in my chair with my newspaper pretending to have forgotten they were there. As they reached the entryway, Saskia's voice dropped to a whisper. The living room had excellent acoustics, something Constance had loved about the 1830 architecture. One more week to file the report. Concluding capacity is diminished is enough, she said quietly. That gives us the psychiatric evaluation, the trust amendment, and the facility tour all aligned. Clean, legal, irreversible. As they leave, she whispers to the psychiatrist, one more week to file the report. Concluding capacity is diminished is enough. Oh, she doesn't know the nano camera in the living room plant recorded everything I installed it on day 4. Dr. Martin murmured something I could not hear, and they left. I sat very still for 30 seconds after the door closed. Then I stood and walked to the potted ficus tree in the corner, the one Constance had kept alive for 15 years. Hidden among the lower branches, camouflaged by dark green leaves, was a wireless camera the size of a shirt button. I had installed it on day 4 of my medication countdown. Now it had recorded Saskia openly discussing the timeline for declaring me incompetent. One more week. I walked to my study and locked the door, pulled up the camera's wireless feed on my laptop, scrolled back through 4 days of footage. There was Gail preparing my pills, carefully swapping the prescriptions for placebos. There was Saskia dropping something into Wren's orange juice at the family dinner. There was Thane and Saskia discussing Wellesley Senior Living while I pretended to nap. And now there was the fake psychiatric evaluation and Saskia's whispered confirmation of their timeline. They thought I was weak, a confused old man failing cognitive tests, unable to remember the current president, struggling to subtract by 7s. They did not know I was watching, recording, gathering evidence with the same precision I had used to map cardiac anatomy for 30 years. I had 1 week before they moved to declare me incompetent, 1 week to gather enough evidence to destroy them all. But I was no longer working alone. Garrett was shadowing Dr. Ashford and Corbin. Simone was analyzing the medications. Otis was delaying the trust amendment. And I was performing, letting them believe I was exactly what they needed me to be. Weak, confused, helpless. While the cameras recorded everything they said in the shadows. At 10 p.m., with the study door locked, I sat reviewing the nano camera footage for the 3rd time, trying to understand why my daughter-in-law of 10 years would orchestrate such an elaborate conspiracy, and then my phone rang with the answer I wasn't prepared to hear. I had 1 week before they filed the diminished capacity report, 1 week before they moved to lock me in Wellesley Senior Living and seize control of my estate. But the nano camera had captured everything: Saskia's whispered timeline, Gail swapping my pills, Thane discussing facility placement. The question that haunted me was simpler: why? Money explained part of it, but systematic murder, elaborate gaslighting, multi-year conspiracy, this felt personal. This felt like revenge. My phone rang. Otis Langley. I answered on the first ring. I traced her, he said without preamble. Your daughter-in-law. I went deeper than the civil suits. I traced her date of birth and real surname via Massachusetts birth certificate records. I gripped the phone. Her birth name is Margaret Whitfield Reyes. Otis continued. Born December the 7th, 1989 in Cambridge. Her biological father was Dr. Edmund Reyes. He died at Mass General Hospital on June 14th. 2003 during a triple bypass surgery. The room went silent except for the sound of my own breathing. Who performed the surgery? I asked, though I already knew the answer. You did, Lester. You were the cardiac surgeon on record. The operation lasted 3 hours and 27 minutes. Doctor. Reyes experienced a massive intraoperative myocardial infarction at minute 87. Resuscitation was attempted for 47 minutes. Unsuccessful. I closed my eyes. Her mother remarried in 2005, Otis said. Changed the family name to Whitfield. Margaret intentionally hid the Reyes surname when she married your son in 2016, 13 years after her father's death. Do you understand what this means? I understood. 10 years of family love was a disguise. She sat at my dinner table, hugged me on her wedding day, bore my granddaughter, all part of a 22-year plan to destroy me. She's been planning this since she was 13 years old, I said quietly. Or someone has been planning it for her, Otis replied. Either way, this is premeditated multi-decade revenge. And Lester, if she blames you for her father's death, this won't end with a facility placement. This ends with you dead. I know. What do you need from me? Time. Keep delaying the trust amendment. I need to gather more evidence. You have 6 days. After that, I can't stall any longer without raising suspicion. He hung up. I sat in the darkness for 10 minutes trying to process what I had just learned. Dr. Edmund Reyes. I remembered the name now. Remembered the surgery. Remembered standing in the OR at Mass General on a hot June afternoon in 2003. Watching the monitors flatline while a man's heart refused to restart, despite everything I tried. I had performed 8,000 surgeries. I had lost fewer than 24 patients. Edmund Reyes had been one of them. And his daughter had married my son to get close enough to kill me. The next morning at 8:30 a.m., I walked into the basement archives of Mass General Hospital. The B2 level smelled like old paper and disinfectant, the fluorescent lights humming overhead as I approached the medical records desk. Harold Fletcher, a 60-year-old medical archivist who had worked in MGH's basement records for 30 years, looked up from his computer. Dr. Riddle, he said, recognizing me immediately. Haven't seen you down here in years. What can I help you find? Surgical file, I said. June 14th, 2003. Patient name Edmund Reyes, triple bypass. Harold's fingers moved across the keyboard. He disappeared into the back room and returned 5 minutes later with a manila folder thick with yellowed papers. I took it to a corner table and opened it. The first page was my own handwriting. Operation notes dated June 14th, 2003, 2:47 p.m. Patient Dr. Edmund Reyes, age 46, presenting with 3-vessel coronary disease. Triple bypass recommended. High risk due to previous MI and left ventricular dysfunction. I flipped through the pages. Pre-op labs, consent forms, anesthesia notes. Then my intraoperative report. Minute 87. Patient experienced massive intraoperative MI. ST elevation across all leads. Immediate defibrillation initiated. Resuscitation attempted for 47 minutes. Unsuccessful. Time of death, 4:34 p.m. I remembered that day now. Remembered the helplessness of watching a man die on my table, despite 47 minutes of compressions, medications, shocks. Remembered telling his family in the waiting room that I had done everything possible. I did not remember if his daughter had been there. Did not remember if a 13-year-old girl had watched me walk out of the OR and decided that day to spend the next 22 years destroying my life. I turned to the back of the file. There was a 1988 staff photo, a departmental picture from when Reyes and I had both been interns at Mass General, 37 years ago, back when I was 28 and he was 31. Both of us competing for the same attending positions, the same surgical slots, the same recognition. I pulled the photo closer. Edmund Reyes stood in the back row, third from the left. Dark hair, sharp features. The same nose structure I saw every time I looked at my son. The same distinctive low-set ears. I stared at that photo for 30 seconds without breathing. Why am I seeing my son's ears on the man I killed 22 years ago? This is impossible. This thought is insane. Thane was born in March 1987. Edmund Reyes had been a fellow intern in my department from 1985 to 1988. We had worked together, competed together. There had been friction, professional jealousy, rivalry over positions, the kind of tension that builds between two ambitious surgeons fighting for the same future. And now, looking at this photograph, I saw my son's face staring back at me from a dead man's eyes. The resemblance was undeniable. The nose, the ears, the shape of the jaw. This was impossible. Thane was my biological son. I had raised him from birth. I had watched Constance carry him for 9 months, had been in the delivery room when he was born. But the photo did not lie, and a terrifying question formed in my mind. What if the revenge goes deeper than I imagined? What if this conspiracy began not 22 years ago, when Edmund Reyes died on my operating table, but 38 years ago, when my son was born? What if Thane is not my son at all? I stared at the photograph until the faces blurred. Edmund Reyes, Thane, the same nose, the same jaw, the same eyes. What if everything I believed about my son was a lie Catherine had orchestrated from the beginning? My phone rang. Ren, 3:32 p.m. "Dad," her voice cracked. "Mom found the vitamin bottle." Every muscle in my body locked. "Where are you?" "My room. She said tonight she's going to teach me how to be more grateful." The terror in those words made my blood freeze. I'd heard Saskia use that phrase before years ago, describing how her mother had corrected disobedience. "Listen to me very carefully," I said, already grabbing my keys. "Pack 1 bag, only essentials. Be ready in 10 minutes. "What?" "Ren, 10 minutes. I'm coming to get you." I called Simone while speeding toward the house. "I need the safe house, now." "What happened?" "Saskia found the supplements. She's threatened Ren." Simone didn't hesitate. "Address is 847 Maple Grove, Unit 12B. Keys in the fake rock by the door. I'll meet you there in an hour." The drive to my house took 8 minutes. I parked 2 blocks away, approaching on foot. Through the living room window, I could see Saskia on the phone, pacing. Her face was composed, almost serene, the expression she wore when planning something terrible. I texted Ren back door, 30 seconds. She appeared like a ghost, one small backpack over her shoulder. Her eyes were red but dry. We didn't speak until we were in the car blocks away. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You have nothing to apologize for." I kept checking the rearview mirror. No one following, yet. Did she say anything else? She asked where I got them. I said I found them online. She didn't believe me. Ren's hands shook in her lap. She knows someone's helping me. The safe house was a modest apartment in a complex designed for anonymity identical units. High turnover security cameras that actually worked. Inside it was clean but sparse. Simone had stocked the basics: food, toiletries, fresh linens. Ren sat on the couch looking small and lost. 15 years old. I'd been so focused on evidence and strategy that I'd forgotten how young she really was. "Do you trust me?" I asked. She looked up, and something in her expression reminded me of the little girl who used to believe I could fix anything. "I trust you more than anyone." "Then trust me when I say this, you're safe here. Saskia doesn't know about this place. No one does, except Simone and me." Simone arrived at 5:15 carrying 2 burner phones and a laptop. She handed one phone to Ren. "Memorize my number, his number, no one else. If anything feels wrong, you call immediately." Ren nodded, her fingers trembling as she took the phone. Simone pulled me into the kitchen. "Saskia's already called the police, reported Ren as a runaway." Of course she did. "We have maybe 48 hours before this gets complicated." "What's your plan?" I'd been forming it during the drive. "Tomorrow I go to the house for the DNA collection. I document everything: Thane's reaction, Saskia's behavior, the whole setup. If she's been drugging him for years, there will be tells. And if she tries to stop you, she won't. She's too confident. She thinks I'm the same man who believed every lie for 16 years. I glanced toward the living room, where Ren sat curled on the couch. "But we need insurance." Simone's eyes narrowed. "What kind of insurance?" "A dead man's switch. If anything happens to me, accident, sudden illness, mysterious disappearance, everything we have goes to your lawyer contact. All the evidence, all the documentation. The surveillance footage, the pharmacy records, the inheritance analysis, everything. You think she'd actually... I think she's protected a secret for 16 years. I think she's desperate. I think desperate people do desperate things. I met her gaze. Can you set it up? Simone pulled out her laptop. I'll create an encrypted file. Time-delayed release. You check in every 12 hours with a code. You miss 2 check-ins. The file automatically sends to 3 different recipients. My lawyer, a journalist contact, and the state attorney's office. Perfect. We spent the next hour uploading everything. Every video clip of Thane's decline. Every pharmacy transaction. Every email and text message. The archives photo of Edmund Reyes next to recent pictures of Thane. The inheritance documents showing what Saskia stood to gain. When it was done, Simone showed me the check-in protocol. Simple 6-digit code changed daily. Missed 2 consecutive check-ins, and the truth would detonate across every relevant desk in the state. This is mutually assured destruction, Simone said quietly. Good. Maybe it'll keep everyone honest. I stayed until 6:30 making sure Wren knew how to use the security system, where the emergency exits were what to do if anyone knocked. She was braver than I'd given her credit for. What happens tomorrow? She asked as I prepared to leave. Tomorrow, I collect evidence that could change everything. And if Mom tries to stop you, I thought about the dead man's switch, the encrypted files, the carefully constructed insurance policy. She won't, because now she knows that hurting me means destroying herself. Driving home alone, I felt the weight of what was coming. Tomorrow, I'd walk into that house and collect DNA from a boy who might not be my son. I'd face a woman who might have orchestrated the most elaborate deception of my life. And I'd do it all while pretending I didn't know the truth. The real war began tomorrow. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, I knew that if I didn't make it out, the truth would survive me. Tomorrow came with a 6 a.m. check-in code sent from my car. The dead man's switch reset for another 12 hours. At 6:58 a.m., with gray dawn light filtering through the 3rd-floor hallway and Nurse Gale asleep in the guest room below, I slipped into Thane's old teenage bathroom, carrying 3 empty Ziploc bags. The room smelled of dust and memory. Saskia had preserved it like a Shrine swim team trophy. On the shelf, old cologne bottle, half-full wooden hairbrush from before college. I'd walked past this door 1,000 times, never imagining I'd stand here stealing evidence of my own son's identity. The wooden comb sat in the top drawer. Several dark strands still clung to the teeth. I lifted them carefully, checking for follicles, the root bulbs that carried DNA. 3 good strands. Ziploc number 1. His toothbrush hung in the holder, forgotten during Christmas 2024. Ziploc number 2. For my own sample, I used a cotton swab against the inside of my cheek. Ziploc number 3. 3 bags, 3 samples. 1 question that could shatter 38 years. I labeled them in my car: Subject A, Thane. Subject B, Lester. Date collected. March 26th, 2025, 7:15 a.m. The private lab offered 72-hour turnaround. Rush service cost $500 extra. I paid without hesitation. The technician was young, tired eyes, professional smile. She didn't ask questions beyond consent forms. I signed as John Morrison and paid cash. Results Friday morning, she said. We'll call the number you provided. 3 days until I learned whether every birthday, every baseball game, every proud moment had been built on Catherine Reyes's lie. The mathematics haunted me. If the test returned 99.9%, Thane was mine, and I doubted him for nothing. If it returned 0%, then somewhere 38 years ago, my real son had died. A child I never held. A boy whose name I'd never know. And the man I'd raised was Edmund Reyes's biological son, planted in my life as part of Catherine's conspiracy. I stood in my son's old bathroom, holding 3 Ziploc bags, and realized I was about to test whether 38 years of love were a lie. Part of me prayed I was wrong. The other part knew I was not. Either way, I would grieve. At 12:30 p.m., I met Garrett Thornton at the Half Door Cafe in South End. He was already seated, manila folder beside his coffee. You look terrible, he said. Didn't sleep. He slid the folder across. Your family doctor has been busy. Inside were surveillance photographs, time-stamped across 5 consecutive nights, March 21st through 25th. Each showed Dr. Cedric Ashford arriving at a modest colonial in Newton after dark, staying 30 to 45 minutes, then leaving. 14 Pleasant Hill Road, Garrett said. His residence. I gained backyard access on the 25th. The next photo showed a basement window. Through it, barely visible, was a large medical freezer. Industrial model, Garrett continued. Minus 80 degrees Celsius, used for specialized drug storage. That freezer costs $30,000 and requires a dedicated power line. What's inside? He pulled out another photo showing the interior through a telescopic lens. Rows of vials and medical storage racks. I enhanced the image. He tapped the photo. At least 30 vials labeled digoxin compassionate use with hospice pharmacy batch numbers. 14 vials of midazolam. 3 vials of concentrated intravenous potassium chloride. Potassium chloride IV, the execution drug, undetectable if administered correctly. Enough to kill 50 people, Garrett said quietly. I stared at the photographs. This wasn't just Constance's murder. This wasn't just Thane's sedation or Wren's drugging. This was systematic: a doctor with hospice access, a pharmacist providing cover, my wife coordinating everything. When do you want the FBI to move in? Garrett asked. Not yet. You're sitting on evidence of enough controlled substances to... I know, but if we move now, we get Ashford. Maybe Corbin. Saskia walks because we can't prove she knew about the freezer. I need a higher entry point. Higher than federal drug trafficking. I need a federal judge, someone who can coordinate warrants across multiple jurisdictions simultaneously, the house, the hospice, Ashford's basement, Corbin's pharmacy, all at once. No warning. No time to destroy evidence. Garrett studied me, then smiled faintly. I think you already have someone in mind. I did. Judge Julius Prescott, retired federal bench, living in Cambridge. 23 years ago, I'd kept his daughter's embezzlement case from destroying her career. He'd told me, if you ever need anything, Lester, you call me. 30 vials of digoxin, 14 midazolam, 3 potassium chloride IV, enough to kill 50 people. 4 days, I said. I need 4 days to brief Prescott. Prepare warrants, coordinate the FBI. Can you keep surveillance on Ashford? What if Saskia realizes Wren is gone? She already knows. Reported her as a runaway yesterday. I met his eyes. That's why we have 4 days maximum. Garrett gathered the photographs. 4 days, but Lester, if anything feels wrong, the dead man's switch activates if I miss 2 check-ins. Everything goes to 3 recipients simultaneously. Saskia knows that. Mutually assured destruction. Exactly. I left at 1:15 p.m. photographs heavy in my briefcase. Somewhere in a Newton basement, my family doctor had stockpiled enough murder weapons for 50 kills. Somewhere in my house. My wife was planning her next move. Somewhere in a private lab, technicians were processing DNA that would tell me whether the son I'd loved for 38 years was even mine. The pieces were aligning. The federal judge who owed me, the detective with evidence, the dead man's switch protecting my life, the granddaughter safely hidden. But time was running out. 4 days before the syndicate realized Wren had vanished. 4 days before Saskia's desperation turned lethal. I knew exactly which federal judge owed me a life, and it was time to call in that debt. Judge Julius Prescott answered on the second ring. Lester, it's been too long. I need to see you today. It's about Constance. Silence. Then, come to the estate, 4 o'clock. At 3:58 p.m., I pulled through the gates of his Cambridge property, 3 acres of manicured lawn, the Georgian mansion where he'd retired after 32 years on the federal bench. A housekeeper led me to his study. The room smelled like old leather and Virginia tobacco, the same scent that clung to my father's law office 40 years ago, back when I still believed the legal system protected the innocent. Julius sat behind a mahogany desk, 74 years old, but still commanding. The scar from his 2008 bypass surgery was visible above his collar when he leaned forward. 32 minutes, I said, settling into the chair across from him. That's all I need. I laid it out methodically. The October 18th camping trip, the November 2nd prescription alteration from Dr. Martin showing dosage changes, the forged trust amendment transferring the estate, the connection between Saskia and Edmund Reyes, Dr. Ashford's freezer filled with stolen hospice medications, Corbin the pharmacist, the pattern of sedation used on both Constance and Thane. Julius listened without interruption, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Julius I saved your life on April 9th, 2008, I said finally. My wife saved your legacy in 2018 with that library donation that funded the Prescott Legal Archive at Suffolk University. I'm here to collect both debts not for me, but for Constance. He stood, walked to the window. Edmund Reyes chairs the governor's judicial nominating commission. If I move against his daughter without ironclad evidence, my career ends before the arraignment. My hand went to my phone. Then listen to this recording, 4 minutes. Then tell me if your career is worth more than my wife's murder. I pressed play. Saskia's voice filled the study, cold and clinical. The disposal timeline accelerates if the sedation fails. We can't wait past March 30th. Thane's response, what about the girl? Saskia, she's 15. If she becomes a problem, we adjust the dosage. The recording ended. Julius stood frozen at the window. When did you get this? He asked quietly. March 22nd, 5 days ago. He returned to his desk, picked up his phone. I'll call FBI SAC Monica Delgado within the hour. 72-hour emergency protection order granted for your granddaughter. But Lester, if this falls apart, we both burn. I know. The warrants will take 48 hours minimum. Drug trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, insurance fraud. We'll coordinate simultaneous raids across 4 locations. Thank you, Julius. He met my eyes. Don't thank me yet. Edmund Reyes doesn't lose quietly. Before I share what Wren told me that afternoon, are you still here? Comment A, if you think she witnessed the murder, or B, if she only heard it add one reason why. Please note, the next part contains recreated details for emotional impact. If that's not for you, feel free to stop here. I drove to Simone's Brookline townhouse at 6:30 p.m. Wren sat at the kitchen table, 3 pages of notebook paper spread before her, a handwritten timeline, each entry time stamped. I wrote everything down, she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. Everything I remember from October 18th. I pulled up a chair beside her. 7:30 p.m., she read. Saskia made tea in the blue camping kettle, said it was for Grandma's altitude sickness. Grandma said she felt fine, but Saskia insisted she drink it all. Her finger moved down the page. 9:45 p.m., Grandma stumbled to her tent. Her breathing sounded wrong, labored like she couldn't get enough air. Surgeons learn, early the body remembers trauma, even when the mind refuses. Watching Wren read that timeline, I realized her 15-year-old hands had been shaking since October, not from cold, but from carrying a murder secret for 5 months. 11:20 p.m. Wren's voice cracked. I heard Saskia whisper to Thane outside my tent. She said, "She's fighting it. Double dose didn't work." I pretended to be asleep. I was so scared. Wren, 6:30 a.m. I found Grandma in her sleeping bag. She was cold. Saskia was already calling 911. Her voice panicked like she'd just discovered it. Wren looked up at me, tears streaming. I should have screamed that night. I was 15 feet away in my tent, and I let Grandma die because I was too afraid to make noise. The words hit me like a physical blow. For 5 months I'd carried the weight of not seeing Constance's murder coming. But Wren had carried something worse, the guilt of being there and staying silent. I pulled her into my arms and wept. For the first time since September 2024, I cried not from grief, but from the unbearable weight of knowing my granddaughter had witnessed her grandmother's murder and blamed herself for it. "You were a child," I said through tears. "They were monsters. This is not your fault, it's mine for not seeing it sooner." Simone appeared with her camera, photographing each page of Wren's timeline. "Wren, you just gave us the most important testimony in this entire case. You didn't let her die. You're the reason we can finally make them pay." Wren buried her face in my shoulder, her whole body shaking. As Simone finished photographing the last page, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her face went white. Lester Edmund Reyes just filed an emergency psychiatric hold petition for Wren. He's claiming she's a danger to herself. The hearing is in 48 hours. We had 24 hours to respond. I called Otis Langley at midnight. "We need a sworn affidavit," I said. "Tomorrow, 2 o'clock. From Wren." "Yes. It's Lester, she's 15. Are you certain? She witnessed the murder. Edmund wants to lock her in a psychiatric facility before she can testify. We counter with legal testimony that makes her untouchable." Silence. "Then I'll prepare the documents." The notary's seal hit the affidavit at 2:47 p.m., and with that metallic thunk, my 15-year-old granddaughter became the most dangerous witness in Massachusetts. Otis Langley's Back Bay office smelled like old paper and furniture polish. He sat across from us, 58 years old, gray-haired and methodical, the same estate litigation specialist who'd represented Constance's will in 2018 when we'd set up the family trust. Now he was helping me destroy the family that trust had created. Before we begin, Otis said, sliding Edmund's petition across his desk, "You need to see what we're responding to." I scanned the document: standard psychiatric hold language, danger to self, recent concerning behavior. Then I reached page 3 and my blood went cold. February 12th, 2025. Suicide attempt via medication overdose discovered by family treated at home. "That never happened," Wren said quietly. "I know." Otis tapped the page. "They're manufacturing medical records. This is evidence fabrication, which means Edmund knows the psychiatric hold won't survive scrutiny. This is a delay tactic, tie you up in hearings while they eliminate other evidence." I looked at Wren. "Are you ready?" She nodded. The notary public was a middle-aged woman with efficient hands and no curiosity, court-certified, procedurally precise, asking no questions beyond the legal requirements. She positioned herself beside the desk stamp, ready. Otis opened the affidavit. "Wren, do you swear under penalty of perjury that this testimony is true and complete to the best of your knowledge?" I swear." "Please state what you witnessed on October 18th, 2024. Wren's voice was steady. "At 7:30 p.m., Saskia made tea in the blue camping kettle. She said it was for Grandma's altitude sickness. Grandma said she felt fine, but Saskia insisted she drink it all." The notary wrote steadily, recording every word. "At 9:45 p.m., Grandma stumbled to her tent. Her breathing was labored. At 11:20 p.m., I heard Saskia whisper to Thane outside my tent. She said, 'She's fighting it. Double dose didn't work.' I was 15 feet away. I pretended to be asleep because I was scared." Otis made notes. "And the next morning, 6:30 a.m., I found Grandma in her sleeping bag. She was cold. Saskia was already calling 911, acting panicked like she'd just discovered it." The notary prepared the signature page. Otis reviewed the text, made a final notation, then slid the document to Wren. "Sign here." Watching Wren sign that affidavit, I realized surgeons and grandfathers share the same curse. We both cut into the ones we love to save them. And neither role teaches you how to live with that afterward. She finished. The notary applied her seal with that metallic thunk. Official. Binding. Irrevocable. Wren looked at me. "Grandpa, after today, I'm not a child anymore, am I?" I could only nod. She'd crossed into adulthood the night she witnessed murder. The affidavit just made it legal. The next morning, I returned to the Beacon Hill mansion at 9 a.m. Thane answered the door looking surprised. "Dad, I didn't expect—" "We need to talk." I kept my voice slow, defeated. "About Wren." Saskia appeared in the hallway. Behind her, Gail Stafford, our estate manager, 52 years old, who'd worked for the household since 2016, was arranging flowers in the foyer, unknowingly loyal to the conspiracy. "Come in," Saskia said. We sat in the living room. I made my hands tremble slightly, spoke slower than normal, slouched in the chair like a man carrying unbearable weight. "I can't do this anymore," I said. "Fighting you, fighting Edmund's petition. I'm exhausted." Saskia leaned forward, careful sympathy on her face. "Lester, we only want what's best for Wren. The facility in Wellesley is excellent. I'll agree to it." I let my voice crack. "But I have one request." "What?" "I want to sign the papers at St. Paul's Cathedral, where Constance prayed every Sunday for 40 years, to feel her presence, witness it." Saskia glanced at Thane, surprised. "That's reasonable." "April 1st, I said. 2 p.m., bring the facility's attorney. I want everything witnessed properly, and I want to pray there one last time before I sign Wren into your care." Thane nodded slowly. "St. Paul's, April 1st. We can arrange that. St. Paul's Cathedral has 7 exits, 3 main, 4 service. In chess, that's called zugzwang. Every door the villains might use for escape becomes the door the FBI uses to close in." "Thank you," I whispered, standing slowly like movement hurt. "I just need a few days to say goodbye to her properly." Saskia walked me to the door, her hand gentle on my shoulder. "See, Lester, just be patient. This is for the best." She smiled, warm, victorious, believing I'd finally surrendered. I drove 3 blocks before pulling over to check my phone. Judge Prescott's text was waiting. FBI SAC Delgado confirmed. April 1st operation greenlit. But Edmund Reyes knows we're coordinating. He just retained the most dangerous criminal defense attorney in New England. Below the text was a photo of a business card, Malcolm Greer, Esquire. The tagline made my chest tighten. Undefeated in 47 federal cases. I spent an hour researching Malcolm Greer, 47 federal cases, 47 wins, 3 involving FBI evidence chains he'd dismantled on procedural grounds. If Edmund had retained him, our window was closing faster than I'd calculated. But some questions couldn't wait for legal strategy. I handed the lab technician 3 Ziploc bags hair toothbrush, saliva, and paid $4,800 to learn whether the son I raised for 38 years shares my blood or my wife's murder. The Boston Genome Center occupied the 3rd floor of a Longwood Medical Area building I'd driven past 1,000 times during my surgical career. The technician was young efficient, wearing purple nitrile gloves as she logged each sample. Rush paternity test, 48 hours, she said, scanning the labels. Results by March 30th, 5 p.m. Total is $4,800. Are you certain you want to proceed? I've performed 8,000 surgeries, I said. I've never been less certain of anything in my life. Run it. She paused, something flickering across her face. Professional curiosity? Maybe recognition. Riddle, she said, slowly checking the intake form. We had another riddle test about 2 years ago. Similar rush request. My chest tightened. Let me check. She typed into her system. March 2023. Constance Riddle ordered a paternity comparison, paid for 48-hour processing. The room tilted slightly. What were the results? It came back anomalous, inconclusive markers. We flagged it for follow-up testing, but she scrolled down. She never retrieved the results. The file's still in our archive system. Constance had known. 2 years ago, she'd suspected and tested, found something wrong, and never told me. Run mine, I said. I'll retrieve these results. 38 years of bedtime stories, graduation photos, Christmas mornings. Today I find out if any of it was real. I left the lab at 3:30 p.m. and drove to the Half-Door Cafe where Garrett Thornton was waiting with another manila folder. You look worse than yesterday, he said. I just paid $5,000 to learn whether my entire life was a lie. I sat down heavily. What do you have? He slid the folder across. Corbin's pharmacy records. 20 vials of digoxin withdrawn in the last 48 hours, all logged as compassionate use for 5 hospice patients. 5 patients? Only one was real, died naturally 2 weeks ago. The other 4 don't exist. Fabricated patient IDs. I opened the folder. The withdrawal logs were there, each vial meticulously documented with fake names, fake birth dates, fake diagnoses. 19 vials missing, Garrett said quietly. That's enough digoxin to stop 30 hearts. He's not just planning to kill you, he's prepared for witnesses. How many parents have paid $5,000 to discover their entire life was a lie? Or he's been doing this for years, I said slowly. And Constance wasn't the first. Garrett nodded. I'm running the names of every hospice patient who died in Corbin's care over the last decade. If there's a pattern, there will be. I closed the folder. Serial killers don't start at 68. They refine. The FBI needs to know about this. They will, tonight. At 4 p.m., I met Judge Prescott at his Cambridge estate. This time, another person was waiting in his study, a woman in her mid-40s, sharp-eyed and direct, wearing a dark suit and FBI credentials clipped to her belt. Lester, this is Monica Delgado, Julius said, special agent in charge Boston field office. We shook hands. Her grip was firm, assessing. Judge Prescott briefed me on your case, she said. I've reviewed the evidence. The U.S. Attorney issued warrants this morning for 4 targets. Thane Riddle, Saskia Riddle, Dr. Cedric Ashford, and Edmund Corbin. She spread a map of St. Paul's Cathedral across the desk. April 1st, 2 p.m. My team surrounds the cathedral at 1:30 minutes early. 8 agents in civilian clothes positioned at all 7 exits. 2 sniper teams on the adjacent building's roof. Her finger traced the layout. You'll wear a hidden microphone in your tie. Entry code word is hydrangea. Say that word and 8 agents move in simultaneously. Doctor, Ashford gets arrested at his Newton residence at exactly 2 p.m. synchronized to prevent any warning calls. Julius leaned forward. Malcolm Greer will try to get ahead of this. He'll file motions demand discovery challenge the warrants. We have maybe 72 hours before he finds a crack. Building an FBI trap is like cardiac surgery, 1 millimeter off 1 second late, and the patient dies on the table. Except this time, I'm both the surgeon and the patient. The DNA results come back March 30th at 5 p.m., I said. 60 hours from now. The operation is April 1st at 2 p.m. That's 90 hours. Enough time for one final move. Monica's eyes narrowed. What final move? Something I need to do alone. Lester, Julius started. You've given me warrants and snipers and microphones. You've built the perfect trap. But there's one piece I haven't told you about yet, and I need to handle it myself before Saturday. Monica exchanged a glance with Julius. If you compromise this operation, I won't. But if the DNA comes back 0%, I need to know why before I walk into that cathedral. And the answer isn't in any evidence folder you've seen. Julius studied me for a long moment. 60 hours. But Lester, if you don't check in every 12 hours, I'm pulling the operation. Understood. I left the mansion at 5:15 p.m. as the March sun dropped toward the horizon. In my pocket was the key I'd found in Constance's safety deposit box in February, the one I'd almost overlooked. Labeled in her handwriting, Wellesley Storage Unit 77. What all? Inside that unit was whatever Constance had hidden in October 2024, 3 months before she died. Whatever she'd locked away after ordering that anomalous paternity test in 2023. Whatever truth she'd died protecting. 60 hours until DNA results. 90 hours until the trap closed. I didn't sleep that night. The Wellesley storage key sat on my desk, Constance's handwriting still visible on the label. But before I could open that door to the past, I needed to close the door on the present. The phone rang at 8:03 a.m., and Garrett Thornton's voice carried the last piece I needed. October 12th, 2024. Corbin withdrew the digoxin 6 days before your wife died. I set down my coffee. You're certain hospice pharmacy logs go back 6 months. October 12th, 2 vials of digoxin logged for patient X, Marcus Holloway. Problem Holloway died July 9th, 3 months earlier. Natural causes documented. Buried in Gloucester, but Corbin kept him alive in the system. 6 days, I said quietly. He handed them the murder weapon 6 days before the camping trip. We have the entire chain now. Invoice has Corbin's signature pharmacy, time-stamped dosage specifications. This is prosecutable murders conspiracy, Lester. You did it. I didn't feel triumph, just the cold mathematics of justice finally adding up. How many other dead patients is he keeping alive in the logs? I asked. I'm working backward through the records. So far, I've found 3 more, besides Holloway, all died naturally between May and September. All still receiving compassionate use medications through November. Lester, this isn't just about Constance. This is serial murder disguised as hospice care. I closed my eyes. Somewhere other families were grieving people they thought died peacefully, never knowing their loved ones' deaths had been weaponized to kill strangers. Well, I send everything to Monica Delgado at the FBI, I said. Every invoice, every timestamp, every fake patient. If we're taking them down, we take down the entire operation. Already done. She's building additional warrants now. After Garrett hung up, I sat in my study watching the March morning light filter through the windows. There's a specific kind of rage that comes from knowing your wife's murderer signed an invoice. Time-stamped and notarized 6 days before he helped kill her. Bureaucratic evil is the coldest kind. I spent the day moving through the house like a ghost. Gail made lunch chicken soup she insisted would help my strength. I ate it slowly, hands trembling just enough to be convincing. She watched me with that professional nurse assessment checking for signs of decline. At 5 p.m., she appeared in the study doorway. "Old man," she said, voice harder than I'd ever heard it. "We need to talk." I looked up, keeping my expression confused. "Gail, I found your pills, hidden in the Coke can in the garage. You haven't taken your medications for 11 days. You're faking." I let my hand shake as I set down my book. "I don't understand." "Stop." She stepped into the room. "I saw it 3 days ago. Confirmed it this morning. You're playing a part. I alerted the mistress. They're coming tonight to deal with you." I smiled for the first time in 5 months. The expression stopped her mid-step. "You're thirsty," I said, standing without trembling, my voice suddenly clear and strong. "I prepared orange juice for you, fresh squeezed this morning. It's in the kitchen. I've been making it for you every day for the last 11 days. Her face went pale. "What?" "The pitcher in the refrigerator, the one with the blue lid. You've been drinking 12 ounces every afternoon at 4:30 p.m., like clockwork. Very reliable, Gail." She backed toward the door. "What did you do?" "Lorazepam." 2.5 milligrams per day dissolved in citrus to mask the slight bitterness. Not enough to make you drowsy, just enough to keep you compliant, slightly confused, easier to manage. I removed my reading glasses, straightened my posture. You've been operating under mild sedation for 11 days, reporting to Saskia while barely remembering the conversations. Pharmacology is reverse engineering death. You learn the dose that kills, then work backward to find the dose that controls, and I just spent 11 days controlling Gail Stafford, like she was a variable in my longest surgery. Today's dose was different, I continued. Triple strength, you drank it 45 minutes ago. You should start feeling it right about Ort. When it's 5 bis. Her knees buckled. I caught her elbow, eased her into the chair. Her eyes were unfocused, pupils dilating. 30 years of cardiac surgery, I said quietly. I know exactly how much lorazepam it takes to erase 6 hours of memory without killing you. You'll wake up in a hotel room tomorrow morning, safe. Confused and completely useless to them. You won't remember this conversation. You won't remember the last 3 days. And when the FBI questions you, you'll have nothing to offer except a vague sense that something felt wrong. Her head lolled to the side, unconscious. I pulled out my burner phone and texted Garrett. Package ready for pickup. Service entrance. He arrived in 12 minutes, former Boston PD homicide detective, now private investigator, moving through the mansion like he'd done this 100 times before. We carried Gail to his car, arranged her in the back seat like she'd fallen asleep during a long drive. A hotel on Route 9, Garrett said. She'll wake up around midnight. By then, it'll be too late for her to warn anyone. They already know I'm faking. She told Saskia I stopped taking pills. They're coming tonight. Then you shouldn't be here when they arrive. I won't be. I have somewhere else to be. Garrett studied me. The DNA results. They called 2 hours ago, ready for pickup. But they want in-person consultation, something about anomalous findings matching Constance's 2023 test. He gripped my shoulder. Whatever those results say, you're still the man who saved Ren and built this case. Remember that. After he left, I checked my phone. The message from Boston Genome Center was waiting. Paternity results ready for pickup. Urgent results require in-person consultation due to anomalous findings matching 2023 test. Please arrive by 7 p.m. 38 years of fatherhood, and in 2 hours I'd learn if any of it was real. I didn't go to the lab that night. Instead, I went home and waited for morning, knowing the answer would arrive whether I was ready or not. The email arrived 24 hours early. Probability of paternity is 0.0001%. Conclusion. Subject is not biological father. I stood in my study at 6:30 a.m., staring at the screen. The report continued in clinical language genetic markers, analyzed 3 independent tests, run for verification, conclusive results. But those details blurred. Only one number mattered, 0. Thane was not my son. I opened the study window, letting cold March air flood the room. Below, Constance's hydrangea garden showed bare winter branches with the first green buds of spring. She'd planted them the year Thane turned 10, saying every child needed to see things grow. I sobbed. For the first time in 6 months, I cried out loud, not from anger at Thane, but from the unbearable weight of what the number meant. Constance had given birth to my son on March 15, 1988. I'd held him for 17 minutes in the delivery room before the nurses took him to the NICU for routine observation. He'd had my eyes. Constance swore he had my nose. And somewhere between that moment and the morning we took him home, he disappeared. I picked up Constance's photograph from my desk. We had a son, I whispered. You gave me a son, and I never knew him. Where is he, Constance? Where did our boy go? The photo offered no answers. 38 years I loved the wrong child, and somewhere our real child grew up without us, or didn't grow up at all. There's a specific kind of grief that has no grave to visit, no childhood photos to hold, no memories to replay, just the statistical certainty that somewhere a son existed, and you missed every single day of his life. I called MGH Medical Archives at 9 a.m. Harold Fletcher, the hospital archivist I'd worked with during malpractice reviews in the 90s, answered on the third ring. Dr. Riddle, it's been years. At Harold, I need birth records from March 1988, my son's delivery, NICU staff logs. That's 37 years back. Most paper records from that era are in B2 storage. Are you looking for something specific? Everyone who had access to the NICU the night my son was born. Silence. Then, I'll pull the files. Can you come in around 11? The MGH archives occupied a basement level that smelled like old paper and industrial disinfectant. Harold met me at the security door, 63 years old now, still wearing the same style of wire-rimmed glasses he'd had in 1995. He led me through rows of filing cabinets to a corner table where 3 folders waited. March 15, 1988. He said, opening the first file, "Your son's birth record, 2:47 a.m., full-term delivery, APGAR, scores 8 and 9. Routine NICU admission for observation." I scanned the paperwork, my signature on the consent forms, Constance's signature on the birth certificate, everything normal. ANICU night log. Harold continued sliding over the second folder. Shows 3 staff on duty the night he pointed to my name, covering an extra shift in pediatric surgery. Dr. Jennifer Anderson, attending physician, and Edmund Reyes, junior resident, age 31. The name hit me like a physical blow. Edmund Reyes, I said slowly. Are you certain? Yes, he was a second-year resident, left MGH in 1990, went into private practice. I opened the log, hands shaking. The duty roster showed clear time blocks. 2 a.m. to 6 a.m.e. Reyes solo, NICU coverage, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m.j. Anderson attending shift. 4 hours, I said. Edmund Reyes had unsupervised access to the NICU for 4 hours. It's standard protocol for that era, Harold said. Solo resident coverage during night shifts. I flipped to the transfer log. There, at 6:15 a.m. on March 15, 1988, a baby boy Riddle transferred to General Ward for family pickup. Signed E. Reyes, M.D. How does a man process discovering the villain who orchestrated his wife's murder is the same man who stole his son 37 years ago? He swapped my son in those 4 hours, I said quietly. Took my biological child and replaced him with someone else's baby. 37 years later, his daughter killed my wife. We've been murdering each other's families in slow motion since 1988. Harold's face went pale. Dr. Riddle, Do you have Edmund Reyes's personnel file from that period? He hesitated, then pulled the third folder. His employment record. Standard resident evaluations, mostly adequate performance ratings. Nothing remarkable until... He stopped. Until what? March 16, 1988. 1 day after your son's birth. He turned the file toward me. A disciplinary notice stamped in red. Personnel action, Edmund Reyes, M.D., suspended 2 weeks without pay for unauthorized access to patient files and suspected NICU protocol violations. Investigation pending. Filed by, signature illegible. Someone knew, I said. Someone saw what he did and tried to stop him. The signature isn't clear, but there's a witness statement attached. Harold pulled out a single-typed page yellowed with age. It's brief, says Reyes was observed accessing restricted records and behaving suspiciously around the infant ward during his night shift. Who filed it? Harold squinted at the signature line. The handwriting is terrible, but I think... He pulled out a magnifying glass. It looks like Anderson, Dr. Jennifer Anderson, the attending physician who took over his shift at 6 a.m. She witnessed the swap, I said, or suspected it. Where is she now? According to the file, she left MGH in 1989. No forwarding information listed. I photographed every page, the birth record, the duty log, the transfer signature, the disciplinary notice, the witness statement. Harold, I need you to find Dr. Jennifer Anderson. Last known address, forwarding contacts, anything. He nodded slowly. What are you going to do? It's find my son and make Edmund Reyes answer for every lie he's told since 1988. The trail to Dr. Anderson went cold. She died in 2003, no children, no forwarding records. But her witness statement mentioned an abandoned infant transferred to Catholic Charities on March 16, 1988. That's where the real search began. The nun's arthritic hands pulled the yellowed file from March 1988. Baby boy abandoned at our door. No name, no documents, died 30 days later at St. Mary's Hospital from failure to thrive. Sister Agnes was 78 years old, wearing wire-rimmed glasses that magnified pale blue eyes. She'd maintained the Catholic Charities orphanage records for 45 years, and she still remembered the unnamed babies from 1988. March 16th. she said, settling into the chair across from me in the South End archive room. 5:30 in the morning. Someone left him in a basket by the side door. No note, no identification, just a blanket. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed. He was underweight, jaundiced. We got him to St. Mary's Pediatric Hospital within 2 hours. She opened the file, reading from faded handwriting. Diagnosis: failure to thrive, suspected sepsis. Dehydration. He was so small. When did he die? April 14th, 1988. 29 days old. The infection was too advanced. They tried everything. She pulled a photograph from the file, a Polaroid, edges yellowed, dated March 22nd, 1988. A thin newborn in a hospital bed, eyes closed, tubes in his tiny arms. I held the photo with shaking hands. He has Constance's eyes. Even closed, I can see her in his face. My son died alone, and I never knew he existed. We baptized him Michael, Sister Agnes said gently. For the Archangel, we always baptize the unnamed ones just in case. He's buried in St. Joseph Cemetery, Section 12, under baby Michael. April 1988. You can visit him now. I've pronounced death 8,000 times in my career, but holding that Polaroid of a son I never met, baby Michael, 29 days. Failure to thrive was the first time I understood that medical language is just cowardice dressed as precision. Thank you, I whispered. She touched my hand. I'm sorry you had to learn this way. He deserved to be loved. He was loved. I just didn't know it yet. I left Catholic Charities at 4:30 p.m. and drove home through evening traffic, the Polaroid in my jacket pocket. Constance had known. The 2023 paternity test proved she'd suspected, but she'd never told me. Why, back at the mansion, I went to her study, the room I'd avoided for months. Her desk still held her reading glasses, her fountain pen, her leather notebook, where she'd kept lists and reminders. I opened the notebook to the last entry, dated October 10th, 2024, 8 days before she died. One line in her precise handwriting: everything that matters is in Father's medal, her father's Navy Cross. The medal she'd kept in our bedroom display case for 41 years, honoring the grandfather I'd never met who died at Iwo Jima in 1945. I retrieved the wooden box from the bedroom. Inside, the medal rested on black silk lining. I'd seen it hundreds of times, but I'd never looked underneath. I lifted the silk. Taped to the bottom of the box was a USB drive. My hands shook as I plugged it into my laptop in the study. One file, for Lester, watchalone.mp4. I clicked play. Constance appeared on screen, sitting in this same study, wearing her light blue cardigan. The timestamp read October 11th, 2024, 2:30 p.m., 7 days before the camping trip. My love, she said, and I had to pause the video because hearing her voice broke something inside me. If you're watching this, I didn't survive October. Listen carefully. Everything I'm about to tell you is true. I watched for 47 minutes. Watching your dead wife confess on video is like performing surgery on your own heart. You know exactly where to cut, exactly how much it will hurt. And you do it anyway because the alternative is worse. She told me everything. The digoxin conspiracy, Corbin and Dr. Ashford's roles, Saskia's planning, the camping trip she knew would kill her. I couldn't tell you while I was alive, she said at minute 32. If they knew, I knew they'd kill you first. I'd rather die alone than watch you die. At minute 34, she revealed the final piece. I transferred $8 million from my family trust into a hidden account under the name Margaret Ashworth. It's for Wren. Otis Langley has the access key. He doesn't know what it unlocks, just that you'll need it. The account is structured so Saskia and Thane can't touch it, even if they kill both of us. Wren will have everything she needs when she turns 18. $8 million, hidden in plain sight. Enough to protect Wren for life. I know you'll find this eventually, Constance continued. I know you'll build a case. I know you'll make them pay. That's who you are, precise, methodical, relentless. So I'm giving you the tools you'll need. The financial trail, the witness statements I documented, the Lu Yin I made of Saskia and Thane discussing the timeline. She smiled that sad, knowing smile I'd loved for 41 years. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was afraid if they knew, I knew they'd kill you before me. This way you survive. You protect Wren. You finish what I started. I love you more than 41 years could ever show. The video ended at 10:47 p.m. Her final words frozen on screen, don't let them win. I sat in the dark study, tears streaming down my face. Constance had known everything. She'd walked into that camping trip knowing she'd die, and she'd done it to save me, to save Ren, to give me time to build the case that would destroy them. She'd won from the grave. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. at St. Paul's Cathedral, I'd seal that victory. 16 hours left. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, the text read, "Dr. Riddle, we know about the FBI. We know about Ren. We know about tomorrow. If you show up at St. Paul's, the granddaughter dies first. E.R. Edmund Reyes had just turned my trap into a hostage negotiation. I called Simone at 10:49 p.m., 2 minutes after Edmund Reyes' threat text, and asked the only question that mattered, is Ren alive and safe right now? Yes, asleep. Why? Reyes just sent a threat. Says if I show up at St. Paul's tomorrow, the granddaughter dies first. Silence. Then, Ren is safe. I moved her 3 hours ago to the backup location, not Brookline, my sister's apartment in Newton. If Reyes knew where she actually is, he wouldn't waste time on threats. He'd act. The knot in my chest loosened slightly. You're certain? I've been doing this for 20 years, Lester. The threat is a bluff. He's fishing. I forwarded Reyes' text to Judge Prescott and Monica Delgado. By 11 p.m., we were on a conference call, 3 voices in the dark calculating odds. The text is a bluff, Monica said immediately. He's trying to spook you into aborting. If he had real access to the granddaughter, she'd already be leveraged, not a threat. This is psychological warfare. Or he's testing our response time, Julius added. Seeing if you panic, if you move Ren, if we scramble resources. He's gathering intel. So we proceed, I asked. Monica's voice was steel. My agents have been on Ren's last known location since yesterday. If anyone approaches the Brookline address, we'll know. But if Simone moved her 3 hours ago, Reyes is operating on old information. Lester, Julius said carefully, if you want to pull out, we abort now. No judgment. But if you walk into that cathedral tomorrow, you commit fully. What's your call? I thought about Constance's video, baby Michael's grave, Ren's testimony, 38 years of lies. I'm going. As then we proceed, Monica confirmed. Operation parameters unchanged. 2 p.m. St. Paul's Cathedral. 8 agents, 2 sniper teams, simultaneous arrests. The microphone goes live when you say hydrangea. After the call ended, I sat in the study staring at Reyes' text. Threats are like surgical complications. If you panic, you lose the patient. But if you trust your preparation, the crisis becomes just another variable to control. At 11:30 p.m., I drove to Newton. Simone's sister lived in a modest apartment complex with security gates and no clear sightlines from the street, the kind of anonymous middle-class housing where nobody notices their neighbors. Simone met me at the door. She's asleep. Are you sure you want to wake her? I need to see her before tomorrow. She led me to the guest bedroom. Ren lay curled under a quilt, her face peaceful in sleep, 15 years old, the only innocent person left in this entire conspiracy. I touched her shoulder gently. Ren? She woke instantly, eyes wide with fear, until she recognized me. Then she threw her arms around my neck. Grandpa, will you come back? Please tell me you'll come back. Promising a 15-year-old girl she'll live to 30 feels like performing surgery without anesthesia. You know, it's necessary. You know, it will hurt. And you do it anyway because the alternative is death. I will come back, I said, holding her tight. And tomorrow you'll come home to Beacon Hill to stay. You'll tend Grandma's hydrangea garden and become the heart surgeon she dreamed you'd be. She left you enough for Harvard Medical and independence until you're 30. Ren pulled back, tears streaming. She knew everything. She planned everything. Even dying, she did it to protect you, to protect me, to give us time to win. I miss her so much. So do I, but she's still winning. Tomorrow we finish what she started. Ren nodded, wiping her face. Be careful, always. As I stood to leave, Simone walked me to the door and handed me a small bundle, a dark blue tie, a slim metal case, and a tiny pill bottle. FBI microphone in the tie, she said. Transmits everything within 20 feet. They'll hear every word. The scalpel is in your jacket lining, surgical grade in case things go wrong. And the nitroglycerin is sublingual under your tongue if your heart acts up. You're 65 years old walking into a confrontation. Don't be a hero. I took the items. Thank you, Simone, for everything. You don't come back, I'm raising that girl myself. She deserves better than this family. She'll have better, I promise. Driving home through empty Newton streets at midnight, I thought about what I was carrying. FBI microphone, surgical scalpel, nitroglycerin pills. Emergency weapons for a 65-year-old cardiac surgeon walking into a trap. But I didn't need weapons. I had Constance's 47-minute video confession documenting the entire conspiracy. I had Wren's sworn affidavit with time-stamped eyewitness testimony from October 18th. I had Judge Prescott's federal warrants for 4 targets. I had FBI SAC Monica Delgado's 8 agents and 2 sniper teams. I had Garrett Thornton's pharmaceutical evidence showing Corbin's 6-month drug theft pattern. I had Harold Fletcher's 1988 hospital records proving Edmund Reyes swapped my son. I had 4 file boxes of documentation spanning 37 years. And I had one question to ask Thane, a question he couldn't answer without destroying himself. The microphone would capture everything. The scalpel would stay in my pocket. The nitroglycerin would remain unused. All I needed to do was show up and ask the right question. At 12:18 a.m., as I pulled into my Beacon Hill driveway, my phone lit up with a calendar alert. April 1st, 2025, 1400, St. Paul's Cathedral. 13 hours and 42 minutes until I walked into a church to destroy the family that destroyed mine. I didn't feel fear. I felt like a surgeon scheduling the most important operation of my life. The patient was justice. The disease was 37 years of lies. And the prognosis was certain someone would die on that table tomorrow, but it wouldn't be me. I slept 3 hours. At dawn, I visited St. Joseph Cemetery and stood before the small marker, Baby Michael, April 1988. Then I drove home to prepare for the operation that would end 37 years of lies. The FBI technician adjusted the microphone in my tie at 11:07 a.m. and said, "Audio confirmed, Dr. Riddle, everything you say in that cathedral goes on federal record." My study had become a command center. Monica Delgado stood by the window reviewing tactical positions. Judge Prescott sat in the corner chair, silent and grave. Garrett Thornton monitored his laptop, tracking the target's movements in real time. "Final briefing," Monica said, turning to face me. "You enter St. Paul's at 1:55 p.m. 3 targets arrive at 2 o'clock. Your only mission, get them to confess on record. The moment you say hydrangea, we move in from 5 positions." "Dr. Ashford," I asked, "arrested simultaneously at his Newton residence the moment you give the signal. We have the freezer, the medications, everything." Garrett looked up from his screen. "Gail Stafford cooperated last night. She's testifying against them for a plea deal memory loss, or not. She kept records. Phone logs, medication schedules, conversations she documented thinking she was protecting herself. She'll bury them." Even neutralized the nurse had become my witness. The irony wasn't lost on me. Monica stepped closer. "Dr. Riddle, are you ready for this?" I looked at Constance's photograph on my desk. "I've waited 6 months. I'll be fine." At 1:55 p.m., I walked through the heavy wooden doors of St. Paul's Cathedral. The space smelled of incense and old stone. Rain had started steady April showers that cast shifting shadows through the stained glass windows, painting the pews in blues and reds. The vestry waited behind the altar, a wooden table, 4 chairs. On a nearby shrine, someone had placed fresh hydrangeas, Constance's favorite flower. I didn't know if that was FBI staging or divine coincidence. I arranged 3 items on the table, the DNA test results showing 0.0001% paternity, the 1988 Polaroid of baby Michael in his hospital bed, Edmund Reyes's personnel file with a disciplinary notice dated March 16, 1988. Then I waited. Walking into that cathedral felt like entering an operating room where I was both the surgeon and the patient. I'd cut open the truth, and the bleeding would kill what I love most. At 2 o'clock p.m. exactly, the vestry door opened. Thane entered first, wearing a dark suit that made him look older than 38. Saskia followed in professional gray, carrying a leather briefcase. Behind them came Edmund Corbin, 52 years old, the hospital pharmacist who'd stolen enough digoxin to kill 30 people looking nervous and small beside the others. None of them noticed the elderly couple praying in the third pew, the young man lighting candles by the south wall, the maintenance worker adjusting the heating vent. FBI agents, all of them. "Dad," Saskia said warmly, setting the briefcase on the table. "We're here. This won't take long." She extracted an 80-page document. "Sign on pages 3, 17, 42, 67, and 80. Then you're free to rest at Wellesley. They're expecting you this evening." I didn't move. Instead, I gestured to the 3 items I'd placed on the table. "Before I sign, I want you to know this, I know everything." Thane's eyes dropped to the DNA report. His face went white. Saskia followed his gaze. 30 seconds of silence stretched into eternity as she processed what she was seeing. The Polaroid, the file, the test results. "How long have you known?" she asked finally, her voice still controlled. "Long enough. Your father swapped my son in 1988. My biological child died at 29 days old in a Catholic orphanage. You killed my wife with digoxin stolen from the hospice where Corbin works. You've been sedating Thane for years to make him compliant, and you planned to lock me in a psychiatric facility while you stole everything Constance left behind." Corbin moved toward the door. The maintenance worker stood blocking his path. "We can explain," Thane started. "No," Saskia's voice cut like ice. "We can't, and we won't." She looked at me with something like respect. "My father died by your hand in 2003. Your wife was the price to be paid. I have no regrets." Thane turned to her, shaking. "Saskia, what is she talking about? Who was my real father?" "Edmund Reyes," I said quietly. "The man who swapped you into my life when you were 3 days old. The man who died on my operating table 22 years ago. There's a specific sound handcuffs make when they close on someone you raised from infancy, a metallic click that severs 38 years in half a second." Thane collapsed into the chair, sobbing. "She told me, Constance told me before we left in October, said my real father was Reyes, the man who died during your surgery. Saskia found me after his funeral, said we were fellow victims of your negligence. I believed her." The words hit me like a blade. Constance had known. She'd told Thane the truth, and they'd killed her for it. "Son, don't call me that," he wept. "You said it yourself. I'm not your son." "You are," I said softly. "Biology doesn't change 38 years, but I can't save you from this." I whispered the word into my microphone, hydrangea. The cathedral erupted. FBI agents materialized from every corner. Monica Delgado's voice rang out. "Federal agents' hands where we can see them. Bauer om de soanendigaoso." Handcuffs clicked on Thane's wrists, on Saskia's, on Corbin's. I stood and looked Thane in the eye as they pulled him to his feet. Rain drummed against the stained glass, casting blue and red shadows across his bowed head. "I still love you," I said, "but I cannot save you from this." As FBI agents led the 3 conspirators towards separate vehicles, Saskia turned back and locked eyes with me through the rain-streaked cathedral doors. Her lips moved silently, forming 3 words I could read perfectly: "He killed father." For the first time in 6 months, I felt the ground shift, because I didn't know if she meant her father died during my surgery by accident, or if I'd killed Edmund Reyes deliberately and buried the memory for 22 years. I stood in the hollow silence of the empty cathedral, the rain drumming a relentless, suffocating rhythm against the stained glass windows. Saskia's silent accusation continued to swirl and echo in the chambers of my mind, searing and sharp. Did I truly kill Edmund Reyes deliberately back on that fateful day in 2003? That question felt like a surgical scalpel I had accidentally left inside a patient's chest years ago. It had remained hidden and dormant for decades, only to suddenly begin cutting from within, leaving my breath shallow and ragged. Every heartbeat felt like a cross-examination of a darkness in my past that I was too terrified to confront. At 2:32 p.m., with the FBI microphone still clipped firmly beneath my tie, Agent Delgado's cold clinical voice crackled through my earpiece. "Team 2 is breaching the Newton target now, suspect located in the basement with the medical freezer." The static of the present pulled me from the mire of those haunting memories. A stark reminder that this hunt was far from over, and the most horrific secrets were finally being dragged into the light. I pressed the earpiece closer, listening to the operation unfold in real time. FBI hands where we can see them. The sound of a door splintering, footsteps on stairs, then Monica's voice cold and precise. "Dr. Cedric Ashford, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, medical fraud, and illegal possession of controlled substances." A man's voice, 61 years old and trembling. I was organizing the inventory. "You were packing 4 Pelican cases with digoxin vials. We've been watching you for 30 minutes. Silence. Then, Monica again. "Target apprehended, medical freezer secured. Inventory count, 27 digoxin vials, 14. Midazolam, 3 potassium chloride, XV vials. Enough to kill 50 people. Forensics team document everything. 50 people. Dr. Cedric Ashford, family physician, trusted medical professional, had been running a serial euthanasia operation for years, hiding murder under the pretense of compassionate end-of-life care. Another voice crackled through the headset. Gail Stafford, the estate nurse I'd drugged with lorazepam 11 days ago, now cooperating witness. "That's Dr. Ashford," she said, voice shaking. "He gave me the vials in September, told me it was for Mrs. Riddle's comfort care during the camping trip. Said she was in pain, needed help sleeping. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it was murder." "Tis, you documented the handoff?" Monica asked. "Yes, I kept a log. Dates, dosages, everything. I thought I was protecting myself from malpractice claims. I didn't realize I was documenting a conspiracy. Listening to a doctor weep over federal radio while standing in a cathedral feels like performing surgery in reverse. You don't save the patient. You watch them bleed out from the truth they swallowed whole." Dr. Ashford's voice came through again, broken and sobbing. "I'm a doctor. I took an oath. How did I become this?" No one answered him. Monica's voice returned efficient and final. "Suspect in custody. Freezer evidence secured. Dr. Riddle operation complete. All 4 targets arrested. You can remove the microphone." I pulled the tie off slowly, folding it with the same precision I'd used to fold surgical gowns for 30 years. 4 arrests, 4 conspirators. 6 months of investigation compressed into 3 minutes of federal justice. Judge Prescott found me in the vestry 20 minutes later. "It's done," he said quietly. "Arraignments tomorrow morning, federal charges for all 4. The U.S. attorney is confident between Wren's testimony, Constance's video, the pharmaceutical records. And now Gail's cooperation this case is airtight. Thank you, Julius." He gripped my shoulder. "Go home, Lester. Bring that girl home. She's waited long enough." At 7 p.m., Simone's car pulled up to the Beacon Hill mansion. I stood on the front steps as Wren climbed out, moving slowly, like someone afraid the world might shatter if she walked too fast. Then she saw the garden. Constance's hydrangeas, the ones she'd planted when Thane turned 10, the ones that bloomed blue every spring because the soil was acidic from decades of pine needles. They glowed gold in the late afternoon sunset, still bare from winter, but showing the first green buds of April. Wren ran. She threw her arms around me and cried, not the terrified sobbing from the safe house, but something deeper. Relief, grief, homecoming, all of it pouring out at once. I held her and said nothing. Sometimes silence is the only honest language left. Judge Prescott emerged from the house, Garrett and Simone standing respectfully behind him on the porch. "Wren," Julius said gently, "I've filed for temporary guardianship. Your grandfather is your de facto guardian until the official hearing next week. After that, formal adoption if he wishes and you agree." Wren pulled back, looking up at me. "Grandpa, will I stay here forever?" Hydrangeas change color based on soil, acidity, blue, in acid pink, in alkaline, and watching Wren stand in Constance's garden, I realize grief works the same way. It shifts depending on what ground you're standing on when you try to grow again. "For as long as you want to stay," I said. She shook her head, voice firm despite the tears. "I don't want to go anywhere. This is my home now." Simone smiled from the porch. Garrett nodded. Julius looked at me with something like pride. The girl who'd begun this story as a traumatized witness hiding in fear had just claimed Beacon Hill as her inheritance, victim to heir, silenced child to empowered survivor. Constance would have been proud. "Then it's settled," Julius said. "Welcome home, Wren." As the others said their goodbyes and departed, Simone, with a final hug for Wren, Garrett, with a firm handshake for me, Julius with legal papers to file, the garden filled with evening quiet. Birds called from the oak trees. The rain had stopped, leaving everything smelling of wet earth and new growth. Wren and I walked toward the house in the fading sunset, her hand in mine. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the preview. "Dr. Riddle, this is Thane. They're allowing me 1 call before arraignment. I need to tell you something about the 2003 surgery, something Mom told me before she died. It wasn't an accident. Can you visit me tomorrow at 9 a.m., Suffolk County Jail? Door." I stared at the screen, Saskia's accusation, suddenly crystallizing into something concrete. Constance had known. She'd told Thane. And now, with federal charges hanging over his head, my son, my not son, was ready to tell me the truth. It wasn't an accident. 4 words that could rewrite 22 years of memory. I looked at Wren beside me, finally safe, finally home. Then at the text message that promised to destroy whatever peace I'd just won. The question wasn't whether I'd visit Thane tomorrow at 9 a.m. The question was whether I wanted to hear an answer I'd spent 22 years refusing to ask. I never got that 9 a.m. jail visit. The arraignments moved too fast, the plea deals came too quickly, and by the time the dust settled, Thane wasn't in county lockup anymore. He was in South Bay House of Correction, sentenced and processing into the system. 5 weeks after the arrests, I drove to South Bay knowing that the son I raised for 38 years would be there for the next 25. The visitation room smelled like industrial disinfectant and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in cold white. I sat at a small table divided by plexiglass waiting. Thane appeared in orange scrubs escorted by a guard. He'd lost weight 8 kilograms, at least maybe more. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. When he sat down across from me and picked up the phone receiver, his hand shook. "You came," he said. "I came. I didn't think you would. After the sentencing, after everything." "What was the final count?" I asked. Not because I didn't know, but because I needed to hear him say it. He swallowed hard. 25 years, manslaughter conspiracy to commit fraud accessory after the fact. They dropped the murder charge when I testified against Saskia. And the others? Yet Saskia got life without parole. First-degree murder conspiracy, elder abuse. Edmund Corbin got 22 years as accessory. Doctor. Ashford got 30 years plus asset forfeiture. They seized his house, his practice, everything. I nodded slowly. The sentencing had been front-page news for a week. I'd read every article, watched every court report. But hearing it from Thane's mouth made it real in a way the headlines never could. "Do you still consider me your son?" he asked suddenly. "After everything, do you—" I looked at him through the plexiglass. 38 years of birthday parties, baseball games, graduation ceremonies, Christmas mornings, bedtime stories. All of it built on a lie that neither of us had known. 90 seconds passed in silence. "I will always remember the 38 years I loved you," I said finally. "That was real. The rest I don't know what to do with it yet. Give me time." His face crumpled. Tears streamed down his cheeks. "I don't deserve time. I don't deserve you. But thank you for coming. Touching hands through prison glass is like performing surgery with gloves on. You feel the shape of what you're holding, but never the warmth, never the pulse beneath the skin." We pressed our palms to opposite sides of the plexiglass. 2 hands not of the same blood, separated by 2 inches of industrial barrier. "Will you come back?" he whispered. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe, eventually. I need time to figure out what forgiveness looks like when everything you believed was a lie." He nodded, understanding in a way only someone who'd lived the same deception could understand. "Ren," he asked. "Safe, home, thriving." "Good. That's good. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I never wanted any of this." "She knows." The guard announced 5 minutes remaining. Thane and I sat in silence, hands still pressed to the glass, trying to hold on to whatever fragment of fatherhood survived the truth. When time was up, I stood without looking back. The walk to the parking lot felt like moving through water, every step heavier than the last. I dropped my car keys twice on the asphalt. My hands were shaking so violently I couldn't grip them. When I finally got into the driver's seat, I couldn't start the engine. I sat there for 10 minutes staring at the steering wheel, sobbing quietly in a prison parking lot while the May sun beat down on the windshield. 38 years, 25 more. He'd be 63 when he got out. I'd be 90. Would I even remember his face by then? Would I want to? I've driven the route from South Bay to Beacon Hill 16,000 times in 40 years. But today every red light felt like a moral question I couldn't answer. Do you forgive him? Should you? Can love survive this much truth? I passed a hydrangea nursery on Route 9, brilliant blue blooms in neat rows, ready for spring planting. Constance used to stop there every April. I kept driving. When I pulled into the Beacon Hill driveway at 4:15 p.m., Ren was studying in the garden. She sat in Constance's old wrought iron chair, calculus textbook open on her lap, surrounded by the hydrangeas that were finally showing their first blue blooms. She looked up when she heard the car door, saw my face, closed the book. She didn't ask where I'd been, didn't ask what happened. She simply opened her arms. "You're home," she said as I held her. "That's all that matters. You're home." "I saw him," I whispered. "I told him the truth. It didn't fix anything, but it was the truth. Truth doesn't have to fix things to be worth telling." Wisdom from a 15-year-old who'd survived her own impossible truths. We stood there in the garden while the afternoon sun painted everything gold. After a long moment, Wren pulled back and handed me an envelope. "This came today," she said, "from Harvard Medical School Office of Admissions." My hands were still trembling as I opened it. The paper felt impossibly heavy. "Dear Ms. Wren Riddle, on behalf of the Admissions Committee, I am pleased to offer you early acceptance to Harvard Medical School's Pre-Medical Sciences program beginning fall 2028. I read it 3 times before the words made sense. Constance had dreamed of this moment for 15 years. She'd set up the trust, hidden the money, died protecting Wren's future, and now, from beyond the grave, she was still winning battles I didn't even know we were fighting. "Grandma would be proud," Wren said softly. "She would be," I agreed. "She is." We walked back toward the house together, the acceptance letter in my hand, the hydrangeas blooming blue behind us. The past was broken. The present was fragile. But the future Constance had bought with her life, was finally secure. That Harvard acceptance letter sat framed on the mantel for 3 months, a promise Constance had made from beyond the grave. 3 months after I visited Thane in prison, the hydrangeas bloomed in colors Constance would have called impossible: deep purples, electric blues, whites so bright they looked like snow in July heat. July 28th arrived golden and warm. I found Wren and Simone in the garden pruning shears in hand, working their way through the sprawling bushes that had taken over the south corner. Grandpa, Wren called when she saw me. "Look at this one. The blooms are twice as big as last year." She was right. The hydrangeas had exploded this season, fed by 9 months of tears, soaked into the soil, nourished by grief. I'd watered them with every morning since October. "Your grandmother would be proud," I said. "Now, she planted most of these herself, didn't she?" "Everyone. She said a garden was the only legacy that grew more beautiful after you died." At 3 p.m., Otis Langley's car pulled into the driveway. He carried a leather portfolio and wore the satisfied expression of a lawyer about to deliver good news. "Dr. Riddle, Wren, Ms. Whitfield," he nodded to each of us. "May we sit?" We gathered around Constance's old wooden bench, the one she'd sat on every evening for 9 years, watching the hydrangeas shift from pink to blue as the soil changed. Otis opened the portfolio. "I'm here to officially announce the Margaret Ashworth Trust. $8 million established by Constance Riddle 3 months before her death. Purpose: to fund Wren's complete medical education at Harvard and provide financial independence until age 30. Wren's hand found mine. 8 years fully funded. 8 years. Undergraduate pre-medical program, medical school residency if needed, housing, books, living expenses, plus investment accounts that will mature when you turn 30. Your grandmother thought of everything." Wren turned to me, eyes bright with tears. "How did Grandma know I would study medicine? I only decided 2 weeks ago when I got the acceptance letter." I smiled through my own tears. "Your grandmother knew everything. She just never told anyone until it was necessary. She watched you from the day you were born. She knew you'd become the doctor she wanted to be, but never had the chance. She was that certain. Gardens are the only surgeries that succeed after the surgeon dies. Constance planted these hydrangeas 9 years ago, and they bloom more beautifully now than when her hands were still alive to tend them." Otis reviewed the remaining documents, trust administration disbursement schedules, investment strategies Constance had specified, with the same precision she'd used planning dinner parties. Every detail accounted for, every contingency covered. "She really did think of everything," Wren whispered. "She always did," I said, "even her own death." After Otis left and Wren departed for her evening violin lesson, I sat alone on that wooden bench as twilight painted the sky purple-blue like the hydrangeas surrounding me. I pulled out the framed Polaroid I'd been carrying in my jacket pocket for 3 months. Baby Michael April, 1988, eyes closed, 29 days old. My firstborn son, the child I never got to hold. I spoke to Constance in my mind the way I'd done every evening since she died. "My love, I didn't save you that October night. That is a sin I will carry until I come to you. But I didn't let them win. I kept your garden. I kept your granddaughter. She will become a heart surgeon as you dreamed. And one day when I finally join you, I will hold our firstborn son. The child I never got to embrace. The child who has waited for me for 38 years on the other side. Holding a photograph of a son who died before he could open his eyes feels like holding a scalpel over an empty operating table. All the precision in the world can't bring back what was never given, the chance to live." "Will you help me find him?" I asked the twilight. When I cross over, will you take my hand and show me where he's been waiting? The garden answered with evening bird song and the rustle of hydrangea leaves in the July breeze. I thought about everything that had happened since September: Constance's death, the investigation, the conspiracy spanning 37 years, baby Michael's grave, Thane's arrest, Saskia's cold confession, Wren's testimony, the cathedral confrontation, 4 arrests, 4 sentences, Harvard acceptance, the trust revealed. Justice had been served, but it tasted like ash mixed with honey sweet and bitter, satisfying and devastating all at once. Thane would serve 25 years. I'd be 90 when he got out if I lived that long. Saskia would die in prison. Dr. Ashford would spend his final decades behind bars. Edmund Corbin would be an old man before he saw freedom again. And Wren, beautiful, brilliant, traumatized. Wren would become a doctor. She'd save lives the way Constance had dreamed of saving lives. She'd carry forward a legacy built on blood and tears and $8 million hidden under a false name. Did we win? I asked Constance's memory. Is this what victory looks like? The hydrangeas didn't answer, but they bloomed anyway, electric blue in the fading light. I set the framed Polaroid on the bench beside me and looked up at the twilight sky, turning purple blue like the flowers around us. Somewhere in this garden, in the soil enriched by 9 months of my tears and the blossoms that bloomed brighter than any season before, my wife was telling me the same truth she'd whispered 41 years ago on our wedding day. Love doesn't end when the heart stops, she'd said. It just changes address. I believed her then. I believe her now. My wife always said, hydrangeas bloom brightest when the soil has been soaked in tears. The garden this year is greener than it has ever been. And to you listening to my story, remember, this family betrayal cuts deeper than any scalpel I ever held in 30 years of surgery. Don't make my mistake. I spent decades perfecting my surgical skills, learning to see the smallest anomalies in a human heart. But I was blind to the poison being administered in my own home. I trusted without questioning. I loved without protecting. For 6 months after Constance died, I grieved alongside her murderers because I couldn't imagine that family betrayal could reach so deep. But here's what this family story taught me. Justice doesn't erase grief, and truth doesn't heal all wounds. What saves you is choosing who becomes your family when blood proves false. Wren isn't my biological granddaughter. Thane wasn't my biological son. But love built over 15 years of bedtime stories and scraped knees matters more than DNA. I believe God allowed me to survive Constance's death so I could protect the one innocent child left in this wreckage. When you face your own family betrayal, and many of you will remember that chosen family can be stronger than blood family. If this family story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that betrayal doesn't have the final word. Leave a comment telling me, have you ever had to rebuild family after loss? I read every response. And if you'd like more stories like this, please subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything. Thank you for staying until the very end. This story contains fictionalized elements for reflection and storytelling, but the lessons about trust, family, betrayal, and redemption are real.